And we are live on our pre-show for today's SY0-601 Security Plus Study Group. Hello, chat room. Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. Thanks for checking in. We've got an hour of Network Plus Q&A coming up, so stick around for that. And then after that hour, I'll open up the phone lines, or in this case, the chat lines, to ask questions of me. So there's questions that I ask of you. There's questions you ask of me. We'll get it all going on. Right now, I'm checking to make sure that recordings are going. They are. See my little Cylons down here, lower right. That means that they are recording the audio and video for me locally. I've also got the stream going here in the upper left. That is recording, of course, online. We've got a video switcher in front of me. Everything, hey, look there. That's me. So I can click a button, and there I am. See? So we've got a lot of that going on, but all of my cameras look good. All of my inputs look good. Everything looks fine there. Everything seems to be as it should be. Most importantly, we've got network connectivity. That's a nice one. I want to adjust this a little bit so I can see that 3%. That's what we want, is a buffer rate of about 3% throughout the duration of the study group. And then what else do we have? I think we're pretty much ready to go. I've tested, made sure we've got the lights are good. We've got the presentation is working. The connectivity to the iPad is working. For a change, everything is working. At the moment, everything is working. Let's bring up the chat room. I've hidden the chat room for some reason. There they are. Hey, chat room. Hey, everybody. Folks checking in. Thanks for being here. Downtown Houston is here. Hey, Jeff. Good to see you again. We've got Let's Play in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Again, thanks for being here as well. 68 degrees. How nice. 79 here. High of 85 today here in Florida. There's some more folks checking in. They are more folks in Florida. Florida Connection. We've got Collegeville, PA. Georgia, Maryland, Queens, New York, windy, 51 degrees, bright sunshine in Queens, New York today. Thank you, Adrian. Thanks for bringing me up to speed. I got family in New York City, so it's nice to know what they may be going through as I sit here in sunny Florida. There's Maryland, there's Houston, there's Long Island, there's Buffalo. A lot of New York checking in. Thanks for being here. We got Cameroon, another New York City. Got a lot going on. Today, I've got all new questions for the SY0-601. So we're trying to work through the details of this. There's Chicago and Tampa and England, and Georgia and Melbourne and India and Mozambique and India. We got a lot of folks checking in. This is a very busy live stream. It's hard to keep up with where everyone in the world is and checking in. There's Canada. Always got to let Mrs. Professor Messer know that Canada checked in. That's sort of the standing rule. And right off the top, Spencer with the $10 super chat. How nice. We're already starting up with super chats. I'll put it up on the screen so you can see it too. There it is. Thanks for all you do, Professor. Passed my Security Plus exam back in March, and have you to thank for helping me learn the material. Well, I helped this much. You're the one who took the exam. So ultimately, it had to stick. So congratulations on your Network Plus, and thank you so much for the super chat support as well. We really do appreciate that. That's also a great story. I love those stories of people that say, yep, passed it, got it. Spencer in the chat room, Professor, took my Security Plus exam this morning at 8:45, passed with a 763 out of a 900. That's a fantastic score. But as I always say, doesn't matter what the score is. You passed. It's a pass or fail. Nobody cares what the score is as long as you got the passing score or more. Now, of course, personal satisfaction is always what you want to apply there as well. So I'll take those extra points. Make me feel good about what's going on. So congratulations, Spencer, and enjoy that Security Plus. This you probably won't even stick around for the rest of this, but I sure appreciate you checking in. Maybe you can stick around to see how well you do. Now that Mr. Security Plus certified person, let's see if they really know the answers. See if you get as many wrong as I do all the time. I sometimes will take some of these practice exams, and I'm wondering, what are they talking about? What nonsense are they putting in these practice exams? Stick to the exam objectives, everybody. Stick to the exam objectives. That's the real important takeaway. If nothing else, stick to the exam objectives, even if nobody else does. Ultimately, that's all your exam's going to be anyway, is the exam objectives. After you pass the cert, do you continue with studying concepts for reference sake? Oh, you're going to be... The Security Plus certification is just the beginning of where you're going. It sort of opens the door. And then On the other side of the door is remarkable. Remarkable what you will run into. So that is exactly the case for many of us. As we suddenly get that certification, we learn a little bit more, we open the door and suddenly realize, oh, there's a universe of information we don't know yet. And that's normal. That's IT. That's what we do. That is a normal IT. A lot of people think you get into IT, you learn what you're supposed to learn, and then you're good for the 30 years of your career, 40 years, 50 years, whatever it is. Oh, no. No, it doesn't work that way at all. It's constant refreshing, constant learning, constant. And of course, you've seen this. If you're someone who's been through these as we have for a while here, you know that's the case. Other people getting my attention with the super chats. Luke, you did a fine job of getting my attention with a $10 super chat who says, passed my Security Plus last week with your help, hoping with Linux Plus and Security Plus may be able to land a Security Operations Center role. Is this likely before I earn more certs? It's likely now with the Security Plus. I would recommend looking at some of the jobs in your area to see for the Security Operations Centers, what do they want you to have? Would they like you to have Linux Plus? Would they like you to have other certifications? Although I will tell you, knowing as much as you can about operating systems and networks will serve you well in any type of security role. So I would absolutely recommend you focus on those if you get no guidance from the job descriptions. I have a feeling once you look at the job descriptions in your area, you'll get a pretty good idea of what will be expected of you. We got about 3 minutes to go before we get started. We'll get there eventually here. We'll work through all of those. So we'll make sure I've got everything ready to go. Thank you, by the way, also for those super chats. As I've often mentioned, they are unnecessary, but they are appreciated. So thank you so much for that support. What do you think is the ideal exam for cloud security? Oh, I have no idea. I've not even looked at any of the cloud security exams. When I lean cloud, I usually lean in the direction of Amazon or Microsoft with the AWS and the Azure. So I think those are good combos just because that seems to be what employers are asking for. And they're very good knowledge bases. They're very good places you can go with the knowledge. So I think you get an AWS or you get a Azure cert, you can kind of apply that same concept of cloud to pretty much anything. And then Booge 1911 with the that's not a 1911. He's got the $10 super chat. Got my Security Plus test coming up on the 28th. Oh, right around the corner. Feel very prepared thanks to you. Got an 86 on my second practice exam. We'll talk about those practice exams in just a bit. Feeling good. Taking your third one this weekend. Highly recommend your practice test. Thank you for that, for the recommendation. I, of course, highly recommend my practice tests, but I'm not a good reference. I need other people to look at them and say the same thing. So thank you so much for that. And thank you for the $10 super chat. That's also appreciated. We have about a minute and a half before we get started here. This is not the show. For those wondering, I have gotten emails where people have said, well, I was going to watch it. It was just the back of your head. Really wasn't interested in that. No, you'll see me here eventually. We'll get to that point in just a moment. So it will be good when we work through there. When I hear it's not unusual in the videos, I think it's not unusual to be loved by anyone. Da-na-na-na-na. Now that's all stuck in our head. Thanks so much. Thanks so much, All Player 24, for the earwig. It's now in there. Now I'm going to have to, when we're done here, when I'm working on post, then I'm just going to hit YouTube and crank it up because that's how it's got to be. I think that's da-da-da-da-da. See, it's just there now. It's stuck. All right, 30 seconds till we get started. Let's adjust this keynote. All right, got that's working. This is working. That's working. I highly expect my humming will fire off some type of copyright complaint. That's all I can ever hope for. So before we get started, we'll end this craziness in the pre-show with Lil Horace with the $4.99 super chat who says, passed my Security Plus exam on Monday. Can't thank you enough for the study material. These are great stories. Thank you so much for letting me know. And thanks for the super chat. Congratulations on your new Security Plus. Queen says, passed mine by 5 points a few months ago. See, you only have to pass it by a point. You only have to get the point to pass. And what I usually say when people say, well, I just passed by this much, I say, oh, no, you studied exactly the right amount. You didn't overstudy. You studied exactly what was required. Not only does Queen pass by 5 points, got a job. Here for some mental refresh, and hopefully we can give that to you, Queen. Congratulations, not only on the Security Plus, which is great, but also the job, which is, it's really better. That's the whole point of this, isn't it? So let's get this out of the way. I've got one more. Now I can't do this one because I've already moved my screen over. So here's, because I get that bottom of the screen. Cheyenne says, pass my Security Plus certification. Thank you, Professor. Videos and practice exams were so helpful. I'm so glad to hear that. Thank you. Excited to begin my career in cybersecurity, and we're excited to begin it with you. So that's always good to hear. Let's put chat over here on the right side. Also, thank you. That's a $10 super chat as well. I didn't mention Queen had a $20 super chat. I don't even know what to say. That's everyone supporting what we're doing here has always been so well received. So nice of all of you. So thank you for all of that. Let's do a live stream, everybody. We got time. We got the energy. We've got something going on here. Let's get and let's get a graphic ready to go, and let's go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the April 2023 Professor Messer SY0-601 Security Plus Study Group for the month of April in the year 2023. It's very difficult to put all of this in context. We work on these study groups and get them ready for you every month. So this month, again, all brand new questions that come directly to you. We've created them so that there's something new every time we do one of these live streams. There's a lot to go through today. In this first hour, I will ask you questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. In the second hour, I will absolutely be answering questions from you. So I ask the questions in the first hour, you ask the questions in the second hour. If you'd like to participate, you're here live watching what we're doing, we would love it if you could join us. All you have to do is pop open a new browser window and visit the URL that's on your screen. That is professormesser.com/QA. And that stands, of course, for Ka. I don't know, that doesn't make any sense. professormesser.com/QA will get you both a question and hopefully an answer. We'll find out in a moment. If you would like to use an app for this, you can use the Socrative student app. Socrative is the service we're using. They have a delightful app that you're able to put, go to your favorite app store and you can download this. It will ask you for a room name. The room name is Professor Messer, all one word, PROFESSORMESSER. Make sure you spell it right, or you will not have a question available to you on the screen. Just be an empty room. So make sure you spell those right. Professor Messer, all one word. Now, if you do all of that, there will be a question waiting for you. And that question asks, a company is using a cloud-based service to provide centralized authentication for all of their users. Which of the following would best describe this service? Would it be described as COPE, CA, SED, ALE, or IDP? Now, if you think this question looks familiar, you're probably right. It's a question we got from last month. I always have the first question of the study group be a rewind question to something that maybe we didn't do so well on last month. So let's see how well we do this month. If you think you know the answer, please do not answer in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. That's our standing rule. Instead, you want to go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. That's the link that's on your screen. There it is. That link right there, professormesser.com/QA will get you there. So you can't go wrong. So that's where you can lock in your answer. We're going to come back to this question in just a moment, and we'll see how well you do. I want to thank you for being here. As I mentioned, we do one of these every month, but when we are not live, you can always find other things that we're creating on the YouTube. You can find us at professormesser.com/YouTube. Make sure you follow us there. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you click the bell. Do all those things they always tell you to do when you visit the YouTube. We, of course, have our weekly Security Plus pop quiz questions on Twitter and on Instagram. It's the same question, but on Instagram, you get a pretty picture with it. So professormesser.com/Twitter and professormesser.com/Instagram. Also want to let you know that the current Security Plus exam is the SY0-601. This was released on November the 12th of 2020. which means that it will probably retire. I'm thinking actually it may be after May at this point. That's a pretty good estimate. But I'm seeing now it may be even pushed a little bit further than that. We don't have an official date on when the retirement will be, but I'm expecting to be middle of 2024, somewhere in there. I should probably update this just a little bit to be somewhere around July timeframe. That's what I think. We'll see as we get closer to that as to what it might be. This is a single exam. You don't have to take multiple exams to earn your Security Plus. It is 90 minutes long, and you could get a maximum of 90 questions, but of course you might get fewer than 90 questions on your exam. The questions themselves are scored on a scale from 100 to 900, already a little unusual, and you need to score a 750. Well, how many questions do you need to get right? We don't know, because as we understand it, each question is worth a different number of points. So we really have no guidance to give you regarding how many questions are right or wrong or passing or any of that. Are certain questions worth more than others? They certainly are, but which ones are they? We don't know. CompTIA is not going to tell you. So it's really all about you waiting until the end, hitting the submit button, and see if you got that 750 score. We also have in this study group, a mixture of different questions. Most of the questions you'll see in practice exams, for example, are multiple choice-based questions, but you will find that there are performance-based questions as well coming through. So the performance-based questions, incredibly important, and we do have a performance-based question for you today. Also remind you that all of my courses are available to watch for free online. There's no registration. Nothing is behind a paywall. You simply go to YouTube or go to the Professor Messer website and follow the links to find the index and play the videos on YouTube. I have a whole playlist of this ready to go for you. Some people would like offline versions of these. I have my Success Bundle available, so you can download every video, download them in MP3 audio format if that's what you need. That includes my course notes, my practice exams, my exam hacks ebook. You get exclusive access to this Q&A. You get the questions I answer first in the second hour. And there's more there as well. If you'd like to learn more about our success bundles and how to support what we're doing here, visit our website at professormesser.com/601SB. I also have a replay of this event available immediately afterwards on YouTube. And sometime about a day or so later, sometimes faster, is I have a podcast version of this. So it's an audio-only replay. And because it's in podcast format, it can automatically be downloaded to your favorite podcast listening program. That's something you might want to look at. Simply visit professormesser.com/podcast. And in that podcast page, you'll find links to my A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus study groups. You can add them to your favorite podcast listening program, or simply listen on your favorite streaming service. They're on Spotify. They're on Apple Podcasts. They're on Google Podcasts, other places as well. Find me on iHeartRadio. And if I'm not on your favorite streaming service, let me know which one that is. We'll add it to that one as well if we can. There's, of course, a video replay of this live stream available immediately afterwards. And one thing you will notice is that there are timestamps that are added to the video description on YouTube. Those don't happen magically or automatically. They happen with a lot of hard work from my marketing manager, Lori. Hey, Lori, she's watching this replay and going through all of this. If you like watching those replays and you like having those timestamps available, just put a note into the chat room. And that's a great place. Lori will see all of those live stream replay chats go by, thanking her for that. And she does a great job. So we're so glad to have that there. You can literally go back years to find exactly what you're looking for in every single one of these study group videos. Also let you know that when we're not here live, we are on Discord. That is our chat. You can go to our Discord at professormesser.com/Discord. You can also find links to the Discord at the top right of my website. I have some social media links right there. You can find those, click on the Discord link, and you can join from there as well. Of course, if you have any questions, people are in there all the time. It's such a great community. We have thousands of people that are part of this Discord, and there's usually some type of study group going on, usually in a voice channel or a video channel. It's a great way to help learn with other people that are going through exactly the same challenges as you are with your studies. I know how challenging it can be when you're trying to put all of that into your brain and somehow put it in the right place to be able to take these exams. Follow us on Discord, professormesser.com/Discord. Also let you know that eventually you're going to need to take the exam. Yes, it's true. If you want to earn that certification, you have to get that exam. So always, if you are in a scenario where you are looking to find the best price to take this exam, you may not want to pay on the CompTIA website because that's full price. What you want to do is get a discount. And of course, I have voucher discounts available if you live in the US or Canada. You can go to professormesser.com/vouchers. You don't need a special code. You don't need an extension in your browser. They're already discounted and ready to go at professormesser.com/vouchers. Also let you know, if you buy a voucher on my website, you also get a free copy of my exclusive Exam Hacks ebook. This is a book I do not sell. You will only get this ebook if you own my Success Bundle or you purchase a voucher on my website. And it has all of the tips and tricks that I've accumulated throughout the years of taking these certification exams, things that can help you study, and tips that can help you in the middle of your exam. You may be able to get a few extra points, and when you're passing the exam by about 6 points or so, those tips can really make a difference. So have a look at that. It's at professormesser.com/vouchers. Panama is not an American territory, unfortunately. Let's play. The American territories that are available for these vouchers are the U.S., of course, Canada, separate country, of course, but U.S. territories are Puerto Rico, Guam, some of the islands in both of those areas, but not all of them, unfortunately. So have a look on my website. I list them all out in detail so you know exactly which ones might apply to you. Let's look at that question we looked at earlier. The question asked, a company is using a cloud-based service to provide centralized authentication for all of their users. Which of the following would best describe this service? Is it COPE, CA, SED, ALE, or IDP? Let's show the results and see how you did with this one. We did not get a majority on this one, but I think we got better than we did last month, which was really my objective. I want to see how well we remembered some of those answers. 39% of you answered answer E, IDP. We've got 25% that said CA and 22% that said COPE, which is almost a tie for second. And then a effective tie for third would be SED at 6% and ALE at 7%. We're talking about cloud-based authentication. Now we have to deal with authenticating individuals or services that may need access to resources that are no longer in our physical data center. They might be in the cloud. They might be across multiple cloud providers. So how do you bring all of that authentication back, perhaps to one or hopefully one central place? Well, one of the best ways to do that is with an identity provider. Of course. So it would be identity provider of IDP is exactly where we would be. This is really where we would focus on if we need to provide authentication in one central place, yet another cloud service, but one that we can tie all of these cloud service authentications together. So we would list our users and our devices in that centralized authentication service. This is what we can use for authentication to individual services, or if we're doing single sign-on, that's a great place to go as well. And it, of course, supports all of the common authentication methods. We've got SAML and OAuth and OpenID Connect and other types as well. Those providers are especially helpful these days now that we have distributed our services throughout the world. Now we need some way to bring back all of that security, and IDP is what's going to do that for you. So in this case, IDP was your first choice here. 43% of you chose that one, clearly first place. A tie for second would be COPE and CA. Company owned and privately enabled or personally enabled is what we would associate with mobile devices. CA being a certificate authority. Those have nothing to do with centralized authentication for all services if we're using cloud-based services. An SED, which is a encrypted, self-encrypting drive. That's certainly useful, but not what we were looking for authentication. And ALE, your annualized loss expectancy, is not associated with this either. That's more of a risk calculation. So the answer here, the only one that makes any sense, is indeed E, IDP. That's what we were looking for. And maybe you remembered that from last month. If you did, congratulations. If you didn't, now you know. So if you get a question like this on your exam, you'll know to answer IDP, and you'll have the right view of that. Let's see if we can go to the next step, a brand new question that we have not had before. I refer to these as our performance-based question of the month because it is a performance-based question. I mentioned earlier on the exam that you could get a multiple choice-based question like the one we just had, where you had a question and then there were multiple choices to select from. But of course, the exam doesn't give you all multiple choice-based question. There will be a handful of performance-based questions at the beginning of the exam. These questions can be fill in the blank. They could be drag and drop. They could be matching. They could ask you to put things in a particular order. It might be a scenario-based question where you have to apply a certain set of policies. It might be, there's a lot of different things. And we do a new performance-based question every month. So let's do the performance-based question for this month. Remember our standing rule of no answers in the chat room and no hints in the chat room. Here is our performance-based question of the month. It simply asks, match the technology. Here, we'll put it on here. Match the technology. I have a number of different technologies to choose from here. We have 4 different descriptions of these technologies, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different technologies. So some will be left over at the end. So keep that in mind. Not all of these will be a match because it's a one-to-one match with all of these. For those of you listening on the podcast side, let's go through each one of these descriptions. The first one is authenticate to a third-party website using Google credentials. The second is increase capacity during busy times of the day. The third is unique application functions are managed separately. And the last one is a password consists of random characters. And we have 7 different technologies. They are obfuscation, hashing, elasticity, federation, microservices, entropy, and false positive. All of these are listed on your CompTIA exam objectives. You should know what all 7 of these are. And if you do, it should be relatively easy to match these back to the descriptions. So again, we have obfuscation, hashing, elasticity, federation, microservices, entropy, and false positive. We can authenticate to a third-party website using Google credentials, increase capacity during busy times of the day, unique application functions are managed separately, and a password consists of random characters. So you need to match these one-to-one, and if you want extra credit, give me a description of what the last 3 remaining happen to be referring to. And of course, we'll do that ourselves. So you can step through those as we go through them. I want to thank a few folks in my chat room that were giving out some super chats earlier, but I was sort of rambling through the first part of this. The first one's from Watson with the $10 super chat who says, pass my Security Plus Monday. I know Watson from our Discord channel. Make sure you head over to our Discord server. I could not have done it without all of your content, course notes, practice exams, the DAX methodology. Call out for DAX. Good job. And the study groups in the Discord server. Thank you. You're absolutely welcome. We're more than happy to do whatever we can to get you through it. But of course, you're the one that passed the exam. So I'm gonna put the congratulations back on you and thank you again for the support. And not only in the Discord chat, but for the $10 super chat as well. We sure appreciate it. Jern back in the chat room says, hey, Professor, pass Security Plus on Friday. Thanks to all your materials. Thanks. Here's a small token of my appreciation. Well, to me, it's a big token. $20 super chat. Thank you so much for your support. Congratulations on your Security Plus. So glad to hear it. And thanks again for the support of what we do here. And lastly, saw another one come through. Kevin from Sales. You know Kevin from Sales. With a $10 super chat says, passed with your help at the end of March. What certs do you recommend to start a career in cybersecurity? I'm going to hold that question until the after show because it's a good one, and I don't want to just pass by it super quick. I want to really talk about where that may go and what options might be with something like that. So we'll absolutely step through those as we go through them. DAX methodology, there's a gentleman who is in our Discord who goes by the name of Dax. He has his own style of studying that he likes to share. And I think everybody should probably find the way that works best for them. And his methodology really hits with a lot of people. And we have it all in our Discord chat, so you can find out more about that. If you're wondering, what is that? What is that thing? Well, that's the way to do it. Let's see how you did with this question. We had a number of people lock in their answers here. So let's step through each one of these to see what the different options might be. We're going to match these technologies. We'll start with the first one on our list, which is authenticate to a third-party website using Google credentials. This is something you've probably done on the internet somewhere. You hit a brand new website, they want you to register, but they say you could register with your email or you can simply use some credentials you already have, like from Google or Twitter or other places as well. So that's the place that you will really find a very easy way to authenticate, because now you don't need another authentication credential. Yet another thing that you have to remember, you can use a credential that you know and that you feel is very secure to use on this site. We refer to that as federation. So if you answer D, federation, that is the match to that particular description of the technology. Second on our list is increase capacity during busy times of the day. This is a very easy and certainly common way to configure systems so that when things get very busy, you can add more services behind the scenes, almost invisibly to anyone, so that all the services are always up and running, regardless of what the load happens to be, regardless of what time of day it is. We often refer to that as elasticity, because you're able to elastically expand and perhaps even more importantly, contract when things become slow. So that way you can automate how these services are available to your users based on how much these services are indeed being used. Next on our list is unique application functions are managed separately. Well, we would refer to that as microservices. There's a whole section of the Security Plus exam that talks about the development of applications and how they break all of these different functions up into their most basic characteristics. And then you can build separate services just based on those individual pieces of a service. We refer to that as microservices. And then lastly, we have a password consists of random characters. Random characters, well, if we're putting a lot of random characters in for a password, we're creating some complexity. We're creating a lot of difference in the information that we're putting in, or what we refer to as entropy, which adds this difference, confusion, and just a smattering of very complex requirements to the password so that people are able to have very strong passwords. We want passwords with a lot of this complexity, with a lot of this entropy, so that you know you have a very secure password. So those were the 4 technologies we're trying to focus on. Authenticating to a third-party website using Google credentials describes federation. Increasing capacity during busy times during the day describes elasticity. A unique application function that are managed separately would be a microservice. And then a password consisting of random characters is entropy. And that means we didn't use A, obfuscation, we didn't use B, hashing, and we didn't use G, false positive. Well, these 3 types of characteristics of technologies are things that we really use all the time. Whether we realize it or not, it's something that is very often used, perhaps as you're going through your normal day. For example, obfuscation is a way to make things difficult to understand for other humans. I have a description of this in my obfuscation video where I describe an application or some code that has been written, and then I show obfuscated code. And if you look at those two, they look completely different from each other. In fact, you, as a human looking at the obfuscated code, makes it extremely difficult to understand exactly what's going on, and that is the point. Obfuscation doesn't change what's happening. It only makes it more difficult for us human beings to be able to understand what's happening. At the end of the day, obfuscation, not really a great security tool, but it can help slow things down if humans are involved. Next on our list, hashing. Hashing is a way to get what we refer to as a fingerprint, if you want to think of it that way, of a bit of data. So hashing is a great way to store passwords. Hashing is also a great way to perform integrity checks of very large amounts of data, or even small amounts of data for that matter. So hashing is what we were looking for in answer B, but we did not have a description to go along with that one. And then lastly, a false positive. That's when we get a notification that some event has happened. Maybe a virus was detected on your system, but then you look into it and realize there's no virus on my system. That executable that it says has a virus is an executable of code that I compiled myself from code that I created, or it's code from Microsoft that has been digitally signed. This doesn't contain a virus. So in that case, we associate that with a false positive. It said it was sure I had a virus, but it was false. It did not know that. So that's certainly a very common one. In fact, if you've ever dealt with getting weekly or daily updates from antivirus providers, You see this all the time because they can't check every possible scenario. So occasionally you will see antivirus pop open with a false positive for something that really isn't something that's negative. That's what we're hoping for anyway. But you always have to check and be very, very certain that that is not the case. You never know where these viruses and other types of malware might come from. That is our performance-based question of the week. Hopefully you did well on that one. Let's keep moving now with a multiple choice based question. This one simply asks, which of the following would be the least volatile? And I have for you 5 different options. I have temporary files, backup tapes, CPU registers, NetFlow data, and routing table. So that's what we are asking, is which of those would be the least volatile. Now, if you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. That's the link that's on your screen and answer. Of course, no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We want to have at least some idea of what this might be. If you think you know the answer of what would be the least volatile between all of these, lock in your answer by visiting professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. See if you know what this one is. There's a whole table of volatility that I have in my video. We're going to look at that in just a moment. But one of the things that I often run into, and one of the things you'll probably find as you go through this, is that the challenges with understanding this are very broad. I give you some examples of volatility, of these different categorizations of volatility. But of course, there's lots of types of data out there. So you really have to think about what you are doing and think about where the different data has come from. And I don't want to give you any more information. I don't want to give you any more tips or tricks. We'll have to figure out what that happens to be. Folks are saying, you know, on Socrative, the front end, when you go to professormesser.com/QA, you can answer more than one answer there. Yes, you can, but I only pick one. There's only one answer here. Obviously, I'm asking for the least volatile to be able to do that. But the Socrative supports a lot of different types of input, but I keep things simple on our live streams. On your exam, most of the questions will have a single answer, but there could be certain questions where you have to answer 2 or answer 3, and they will tell you that indeed you have to answer 2. So they'll tell you what that happens to be. You never have to worry, did I answer the right amount? They'll let you know. They're not there to have you decipher how to use an exam. Fortunately, they tell you exactly how many answers they expect on any particular question. And the last time I took one of these exams and answered fewer or even more than what they were asking for, it popped up a message on my screen that said, you answered 1, but I said select 2. Are you going to select 2 or what? So it does give you a little bit of a heads up. I don't know if they're still giving that on the exam. Maybe some of you that did one recently can give us all an update and let us know that that is the case. I don't think, I've never seen on any of the CompTIA exams a select all that apply. They always tell you how many to select. So that's the important part of this. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, which would be the least volatile? Would it be temporary files, backup tapes, CPU registers, NetFlow data, or routing table? Let's see what the right answer is. We'll see what you thought the right answer is. We'll show the results. 59% of you say it's backup tapes. We have 16% that say temporary files. We have a tie for third at 10% apiece with CPU registers and routing table. And then lastly, 4% say NetFlow data. So that's the idea, is we're trying to find the thing that would be the least volatile. So let's have a look at my table that shows the order of volatility, starting at the top with the most volatile. And that means these are the things that change the most. That's really what that means. The most change, the most variation, the most things that are constantly being updated are the things that are most volatile. The things that change the least are the least volatile. So we have in this, and we'll start with the top and the bottom. The things that change the most are things like the information going through your CPU. There are registers or little sections where data is stored in a CPU, and there's a cache also associated with the CPU that's on the CPU chip itself. So the most volatile in almost every case is going to be that CPU and the memory. There's constant change going on inside of your CPU. We often refer to the cycles of your CPU. We used to refer to this in megahertz. Now we refer to it in gigahertz. So we have millions or billions of transactions going through these devices every second. So that's how many times things are changing. That's a lot of changes. So trying to grab data out of a CPU, remarkably difficult because it changes so fast that by the time you've realized you want to grab it, the data's gone already. So that's really volatile. So that's not what we were looking for. The volatility being the least volatile would be something like archival media. This would be your backups. So you take a backup, you want that backup to stick around for a while because you never know when you're going to need that data. So having a tape, we often send the tapes off-site. Sometimes we leave them there for a year or even multiple years where that data sits there and it never changes probably ever again until we reuse those tapes or the drives. So that is really least volatile because that information is never going to change. It's sitting in storage. We're really not going to run into any of that scenario. So I think one of the things you should look at are all of these different examples of volatility. But of course, as I mentioned, not all types of data are in this list. You have to think outside of my list and put in your own options here as to what data might be volatile. And sometimes the volatility and where it sits on this particular scale changes based on what's going on. What if there are constant changes with information that's going over the network? Maybe we have routing tables that are updating every second, which is very unusual. But if the network is having a problem, that's not necessarily something that is unusual in that particular scenario. So it might move up into be more volatile than it normally is. Or let's take the example of right in the middle, a disk. The information we put on a disk often stays the same unless we update that disk. Well, what if we're not accessing the disk right now? What if nobody touches that machine? It may be that certain data on that disk becomes less and less volatile. And you may find remote logging and monitoring data tends to be more volatile. So it is very dependent on the particular situation. I think that this categorization, this example of data I gave here, is a pretty close overview of what you would commonly find. But of course, these things can sometimes change. So if we want something that is the least volatile of temporary files, backup tapes, CPU registers, NetFlow data, and routing table, well, that certainly fits into the least volatile being answer B, the backup tapes. That is exactly what we might expect to see. 60% of you said, yep, that's what would be the least volatile in almost every scenario. I think that's a pretty good answer. And if you answered B, you got that one correct. Let's look at these other options, though. We have temporary files, and temporary files are usually here for a little bit of time, but often because they are temporary, they're not often removed or erased immediately. In fact, you'll notice we put temporary files sort of near the top of the list here. They tend to be a lot more volatile than certainly your archival media or your backup files. We also have CPU registers. As I mentioned before, CPU is going through and changing billions of times in a second, so that's not going to be one that you would deal with. I think if you ever get into working through these scenarios, that's a real challenge, is to capture something off of a CPU. Probably not the first place you would go to get the data you're looking for. Temporary files, we did CPU registers, the routing table. Your routing table generally only updates when there are changes to the routes. So as long as the network is staying exactly the way it is, you're probably not seeing much change to the routing table. But if you happen to lose a link to a remote site, you may find that your routing tables are updated. And if you work on a very big network, especially with many different remote sites, you may have sites that go down and come back up all the time because a network provider loses the connection. Maybe a storm comes through. Maybe you lose power at a remote site. So we might see these things happening quite a bit. Now, if you run into that scenario, those will change. But if they don't, then they stay relatively the same. And that's why they are lower down on that list of volatility, because very often they will be pretty much where you would expect them to be for minutes, hours, or sometimes even days at a time. And then we have, lastly, NetFlow data. NetFlow, of course, is a way to monitor remote systems across the network. In my chart, I put remote logging and monitoring data, because that's what NetFlow is, right here between the disk and the physical configuration or the network topology itself. That information, once you grab it, it's pretty much locked in, but it does change over time to individual spots. Certainly would not be the least volatile, but it's a little better than you might find. If you want more information on the volatility, that's from my video in my SY0-601 course, section 4.5. The video name is Forensics Data Acquisition. That will get you the information you need about the order of volatility. That's what we're looking for. So if you answered B, backup tapes, you got that one absolutely right. Well done. That's where you go. Let's do another question. We're going to keep going. And this next question asks, a credit card transaction has replaced the actual card number with a different number. Which of the following would best describe this data privacy technique? Is that data minimization, tokenization, anonymization, or data masking? A credit card transaction has replaced the actual credit card number with a different number. Which of the following would best describe this data privacy technique? Is that data minimization, tokenization, anonymization, or data masking? If you think you know the answer A, B, C, or D. Yeah, only 4 on this one, just like a real exam. So let's see how you do with these 4 options. See if this is one where you expect to see an answer coming through. We don't have an E. I'll scroll down just so you see. There's no E there. It's just A, B, C, and D. Have a look at that. See what you think the answer might be. Lock in your answer. Go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA. We'll figure out what this happens to be. As always, of course, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. On the actual exam, most of the questions will have 4 answers. If you look at my exam book, my book of practice exams, we'll talk about this later on in the study group. Almost everything in here has 4 different answers on it, because I created this book to hopefully give you a better feel for what to expect on the exam. I usually will get 5 on my study groups and my weekly pop quizzes, because it's really useful to be able to do that. So hopefully that gives you some ideas of what to choose from. That might give you at least another place you can go with these to be able to work through them. I love how the chat room's complaining about the mods. I'm the mod, so you're complaining about me. There's a lot going on in front of me. So if it's something urgent, you may find it takes me a second or two to get over to that. And you're right, the mods, they're awful. They are not good at all. I will guarantee you that there's some quality concerns with our mods, for sure. No question about that. Let's go through this question and see if we know what the answer happens to be. The question, people are saying, best mod in the world. Yeah, we know that's not true. The question asks, a credit card transaction has replaced the actual card number with a different number. Which of the following would best describe this data privacy technique? Is it data minimization, tokenization, anonymization, or data masking? All these are real things, by the way. All of them are from the CompTIA exam objectives. Make sure you are familiar with that. That's going to be pretty important as we step through it. There's a lot here to deal with. What we were hoping to find, though, is a technique called tokenization. If you have ever purchased anything with your watch, you purchased anything with your phone because you put a credit card in your phone and you put that credit card in there, and now you just use your phone to pay for things instead of having to pull out a credit card and put it in, and it tells you to sit there and wait while it reads the card, and we wait, and then it beeps and tells you not yet, and then it beeps again and says, okay, you can remove it. Instead of going through all of that, you just use your phone. And when you use your phone, it doesn't send your credit card number over the network. This is a very nice security feature that instead replaces your credit card number with another number, with a token of your number. But that token's already been set up with your, in this case, with your Apple Pay or Google Pay or whatever provider you're using. They already are expecting that number to come through. So when you pay for your groceries and you use your phone or you use your watch, it sends the token. That token has already been generated on the other side. And they go, oh, that's a legitimate token. That's James. He's buying some groceries. I'm going to cross that token off the list. Because if somebody on the network captured that data during that transaction, and they think they have my credit card, they could try to use that card again for another transaction. But it's not a card. It's a token that we throw away the first time we use it. So someone, even if they got their hands on the token and tried to use that token again, they would not be able to use it. It would say, sorry, you can't use that. That's already been used. This particular transaction is denied and you're not able to use it. So great. Now, it doesn't make the interception of the data impossible. It makes the use of that data later impossible. That's the real benefit of doing something like tokenization. So that's what we're trying to do, is figuring out those pieces. That's whenever we start working through the problems and trying to understand more about it, that's what we're hoping for. So this is not encryption, although ideally encryption is being used on these networks. It keeps someone from reusing that data. Not necessarily a replay attack, but certainly someone capturing that data in the middle with an on-path attack. It prevents someone reusing that data and being able to use it. It is not obfuscation. It is very clearly the use of a token. A one-time use token is what we're using. If you wanted to see how this works, go to my video. I've got a nice graphic that sort of takes you through the entire step of how does that get registered on the token provider, how do you pay for that data, and where does it come from. All of this is in the video. I step through each one of these so you can get a better understanding of exactly what these things are, how they work with tokenization. I try to give you a lot of visual understanding in my courses about this. This is in my video on using these mobile technologies and tokenization. So have a look at that when you get a chance. That was the right answer. Let's see how you did with this one. I don't think we looked at the results on this, but 47%, pretty close to half of you said, yep, that's what I chose, was tokenization in the list of things. Data masking, 39% of you used data masking. Data masking is a technique for security for things that you would view on a screen or on a piece of paper. And if you've ever gotten a receipt and you notice on the receipt, it doesn't have your credit card number, it just has the last 4 digits of your credit card number, and the rest of the number is masked. It's masked with usually asterisks. So you have, you know how difficult it is to say asterisk and masked in the same view. That's a great way to protect data because it tells you what credit card number you used, but it doesn't let anyone else see the number. So that's the real beauty there, is that we are preventing you from seeing all of the data because we have masked it. It's masked the data. Very useful tool to have, especially for your receipts. So you can hand other people receipts. You can lose your receipt. You don't have to worry about somebody getting their hands on credit cards. For those of you that go back long enough, that wasn't always the case on your receipts. We would get receipts that had your full credit card number on it, in some cases with your expiration listed on the receipt itself. And of course, we had to put through a lot of different rules and requirements to limit the information that was stored on those receipts. And we got around some of this by using data masking. We also have 13% that said anonymization. That's when we would take something that was known and turn it into something that is unknown. Well, obviously you can't do that when you're working through something like an exam where you're trying to break out what you might find. And I think if you ever get into a scenario where you're finding that you're viewing information on the screen that doesn't match back to the original, they may be using anonymization. And the data minimization is a technique where you're only asking for the minimum amount of data that's required. I think if you've ever gotten into one of these scenarios where someone has very simply they've asked you for every bit of data in the world. I often see this. You go to a doctor for the first time, they give you this set of forms to fill out, and they're asking information that, of course, is important medically for you, but then they ask other things that have nothing to do with being medical. And so should they be asking it or shouldn't they? If they simply used some type of data minimization, they would limit how much non-important and non-medical data they were asking of you. That obviously was not the scenario here, so that would not be the answer. The one we were looking for was indeed tokenization. 48% of you got that one absolutely correct. That's what we were hoping to find in there. Well, as you can already tell, we're only only into this study group a little bit, and already we've gone through a number of different topics, some of them related to risk, some of them related to data integrity, some related to the security of your data. There's a lot that you have to go through. And so what I've tried to do, because I recognize that there are 177 videos in the Security Plus course. It's an enormous course because it is an enormous set of exam objectives. So I hope that everybody has time to go through all 177 videos. That's 21 hours of information. This is probably not the most expectation I have of most people, because there's so much data there. Do you really have time to go through every single video and break out every single bit of data? You may not. So I've created these course notes. This is the PDF version of the course notes. They are 122 pages long, but it has every bit of text, every bit of the important graphics, all of the tables, everything that's in my videos, I've put into the course notes. So this is a great way to have everything in one place in a summarized view. So instead of carrying around an entire book and being able to work through them, you can instead carry around with you everything that you might need to be able to break down, in this particular case, everything in the exam. And I think that's one, certainly, if you're someone who is trying to find exactly what you need on these exams, this might be the big difference for you. 120 pages long, really 122. If you're looking for something to kind of fill in that gap between your book and the videos, this is what is for you. So have a look at that. ProfessorMesser.com/601CN for the 601 course notes. Have a look on our website, see if this might help you as well. And if you bundle it with the practice exams, you get a little bit of a discount. So have a look on the website for that as well. I know we're short of time here, so I want to get very quickly to other questions other folks are asking on the website. Plenty to go through there. So let's do that. Let's have a look at this next question that asks, a security team has been tasked with maintaining firewalls and identifying vulnerabilities in the company network. Which of the following would best describe this team? Is this a red team, orange team, white team, purple team, or blue team? Yep, we're back to 5 answers. A security team has been tasked with maintaining firewalls and identifying vulnerabilities in the company network. Which of the following would best describe this team? Is it red team, orange team, white team, purple team, or blue team? This is one where we kind of do have to break out all of these different teams that are presented to us in the exam objectives and really understand what is being asked of us. See if we happen to know what this one is. And everything you need to know is in the question, very much like all of the ones that you would get on the exam. That is what we're hoping to find. Now, if you think you know the answer, I've got a link on your screen, ProfessorMesser.com/QA. That is the link you want to use to be able to lock in your answer. There it is. Go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA to lock in that answer. As always, no answers in the chat room, no hints in the chat room. We'll have those T-shirts available soon, I hope. I don't think we're going to make T-shirts that say that, but I almost need one. We'll just put it up on the screen. But that's where that's a standing rule anyway. I think most of you do pretty good with that one. So have a look at what the different options are. Go to red team, orange team, white team, purple team, blue team. Pick your favorite color. That's what the answer should be. See if you happen to know what it is. Go through the different options, lock in your answer. We'll see what that happens to be. I apologize. There were a lot of super chats come through. I'm going to try to go back to some of these on the after show. So I'm not ignoring you at all. It's just there's a flow, and I want to get through as many questions as possible. But in the after show, I can spend time thanking Steve with his $4.99 super chat, thanking Adrienne with her $9.99 super chat, William with the $5 super chat, Joseph with the $4.99 super chat. And there's so many questions in there too. So I will break out some of those questions as we go through them. So hopefully that can help you too. I'm not going to say which one of these you should really focus on, but hopefully this is one you're familiar with as you look at what the different options happen to be. So a lot of people have locked in their answer. Let's see what I think the answer is, see if it matches you. First, let's have a look at the answers you put in. The question again was, a security team has been tasked with maintaining firewalls and identifying vulnerabilities in the company network. two different job descriptions there, two different tasks of a job description. Which of the following would best describe this team? Is it a red team, orange team, white team, purple team, or blue team? What did you answer? You answered 59% of you say that's a blue team. We have 18% say purple team, 10% say white team, also 10% say red team, and then last 3% say orange team. There were some folks in the chat room that said, orange team, is that something made up? And for this particular example, it is. I don't often have fake answers in here, but I ran out of colors. There just weren't any more you needed to know for the exam. The real question, though, as people in the chat room are reveling in their success, I'm going to do a rug pull here real quick, because this question said that you're going to maintain firewalls, but you're also going to identify vulnerabilities in the network. That's two very different types. That's two really different types of scenarios in this particular example. And so whenever you get through this, whenever you start working through the details of this, you start to realize, no, those are two very different things. So if you get into the specifics of handling both sort of an idea of I'm protecting the network by maintaining the firewall, but I'm also proactively looking for problems, then you're really combining both a blue team and a red team together into the same team to create a purple team. The purple team work together to do exactly that. You, of course, are going to have teams that are going to be responsible for maintaining the systems, for making sure the firewall is set properly, that you have the right authentication configuration set up on your VPN, for making sure that there are no problems and you've got log files that you can refer to, and all of those. But of course, there's also going to be a group of people that need to find the vulnerabilities, that try to access where problems might be on the network. That's your red team. So you have blue and red combined together into the same team. Well, blue and red, as we all know, make purple. Well, I guess we don't all know that makes purple, but it does. If you combine those together, it makes purple. That is the one we're looking for. So this is great if they're both on the same team, or at least working together, because the red team will tell the blue team, oh, I found a problem. The blue team tells the red team, this is what we're doing to resolve the problem. Well, if they're on the same team, they're no longer red and blue. They're working together. They are the purple team. That is the one we would focus on. That is the issue or the things that we're really trying to determine with these pieces of it. That is the right answer. That's the one we were looking for, because we had both the offense and the defense on the same team working together. Purple team was indeed the right answer. And unfortunately, only 19% of us identified that as the purple team. You know, most of the time, the blue team that's responsible for keeping the network up and running, keeping the data safe, making sure the firewalls are correct, are not the ones identifying vulnerabilities. So it does make sense to blend these together. And if we're blending them together, purple team is indeed what we get when we put blue and red together. Unfortunately, only 19% of us connected on that one. But as I always say, the only way you're really going to learn this information is when you get it wrong. In this case, we got it really wrong, but that's okay, because now we'll always remember those are the differences between red and blue. Now, of course, we still need to go through and understand what a white team does. That is another important piece of this. So we know about red, we know about blue, and now we know about purple. The white team being sort of the management or the overseeing aspect of the reds and the blue teams. So you can think of your managers, your directors, your senior directors. We can often associate them with someone who's on the white team. And then I threw an orange team. There is no orange team. As some of you are saying in the chat room, there is no cow level. There is no orange team. There is no cake. It's just all fake. So orange team, although I added that there so I'd have a fifth answer, the reality there is no orange team. There should be an orange team, because I like orange. So we'll work on that. We'll try to figure out how we can integrate the orange team into the rest of this. But right now, there is no orange team, and there is no cow level. I think I mentioned that earlier. Of course not. That's not where that would go. So hopefully you are now familiar with the teams. There is a whole video on security teams, section 1.8. The video is called Security Teams. So have a look at those different options if you need more clarification. I think that's the important one that you're going to work through, absolutely, as you step through this. I know we're getting near the top of the hour, but I have more questions for you. So we're going to keep this going and see what this next question, we'll bounce back on this one. Here we go. This next one is, which of the following commonly controls security for a screened subnet? Is that a Faraday cage? Is it protected distribution system? Is it a firewall? Is it a proximity reader? Or is it Active Directory? Which of the following commonly controls security for a screened subnet? Is it Faraday cage, protected distribution system, firewall, proximity reader, or Active Directory? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answers. Folks in the chat room saying the orange team does exist in InfoSec. I'd not be surprised. We always, once we take something and create a series of descriptions from it, the industry is very good about taking it to its nth degree and just beating the dead horse. So of course we have an orange team. What do? They sit around and drink orange juice. No, that's not true. They grow oranges. No, that's not it either. We'll find out later about the orange team. There is a puce team. There's so Colin says the fuchsia team. We'll come up with these. There's more. We take it to its nth degree, to a point where the idea of what we were trying to do with it, we just destroy it. We're trying not to get into the realm of the oranges or the fuchsias or the puce or all of those. But they are out there, and perhaps not to the level of that. There's not every single kind of color, but that's something that might help you too. This is one you do absolutely need to be familiar with. Which of the following commonly controls security for a screened subnet? Is it a Faraday cage, a protected distribution system, a firewall, a proximity reader, or Active Directory? What would that be? What would that be? Would it be something that we're working on? How do we fit through this? What are the different options? Let's see how you did with this one and where it fits into the big scheme of things. Let's see first how you answered this one. Let's show the results, and you can see that 75% of you say it's a firewall. Is this another one that we did? We're about to find out. 12% of us say a protected distribution system. 6% say a Faraday cage. 4% said Active Directory, and 3% say proximity reader. So we first have to have a better understanding of a screened subnet, which interestingly enough was the first question that was asked in the chat room when I asked the question, and somebody said, what's a screened subnet? Well, I can't tell you. That's part of the question. That's what you have to know to be able to answer this particular question. So feel free to step through these and get more familiar with them. I think that's where we need to focus. But here we've got a number of different ones to choose from. And screened subnet, if you go back in the previous Security Plus exams, we referred to the screened subnet as a DMZ, a demilitarized zone. The abbreviation, we very rarely refer to it as a demilitarized zone. It certainly has a military connotation. That's where we got that term from in security, because security in many ways is a military type or style of protection. We want to be that secure. We want to make sure nobody from outside is coming inside to our systems. So DMZ, of course, very familiar in the world of military. Probably the most popular one is the border of North Korea and South Korea. That's a very popular DMZ, for example. In the world of security, of IT security, our DMZ is kind of a middle ground between the internet and our internal private network. So we have to have something sort of in the middle. This allows us to let people come into our network or a part of our network to be able to gain access to services, and we put them in their own special subnet called a screened subnet. We do not put them on the inside of our internal network. So anybody from the internet who's coming in will be directed into the screened subnet, and they will never be directed into the internal side of our network. That's the idea. But we need something to be able to make that decision, to provide the security between the inside and the screened subnet. So the best way to do that is absolutely come in and go to your firewall. Your firewall rules are going to allow all of that to be happening. That's where you want to be. I think if you ever get into the understanding more about where you want to put this information, where you need to put services, where users are coming into the network. If you're doing that on your physical local network, a DMZ, or in this case, screened subnet would be the right place to put it. That's where you're kind of hoping to keep all the potential attackers out on their own network, where if they were to create problems, they would only create those problems for external facing services and not our internal private services. So pretty important to be able to use that. So make sure you're familiar with those different services and how they work. I think if you're in the world of working with firewalls, you probably are already familiar with this term and you've been using this term. And in fact, it's probably why 76% of you say, yep, firewall's what we expected. That is the right answer. That's the one we were hoping for. In this case, the majority here that chose 76% of you chose firewall, got it absolutely correct. That's the one that you would choose. 11% said a protected distribution system. Though, for those of you not familiar, the distribution systems that you have on your corporate or organizational networks are usually cables and fibers that are run usually in the ceiling or under the floor to be able to go from point A to point B, usually across a data center, across the floor of a building. We need some way to get all those cables from one side to the other. And on very secure networks, we usually will put those inside of something where no one can get onto or find any information or affect anything going through those particular cables. So we'll put them in, for instance, in a metal conduit. That metal conduit is something that is a protected distribution system so that someone can't easily run into or get their hands on any of those. We also have 4% or 6% that said a Faraday cage. A Faraday cage is a type of cage that can prevent radio signals from either going in or out of that particular cage. Often a horrible idea to have on really anybody's network. A Faraday cage is probably only used in very specific situations because limiting someone's access to data may not necessarily be the best idea. You imagine having a Faraday cage and then somebody needs to make a phone call for emergency services or the authorities and you can't do it because you're in a Faraday cage. Not what you're hoping for. We've also got 4% that said Active Directory, and although Active Directory can provide some security functionality, or at least provide some data we can use for security functionality, it is not commonly in the control of a screened subnet. So that's not what you would run into either. Not what you would choose for this scenario. And then lastly, we've got a proximity reader. If you've ever used a card to open a door and you get close to the reader, don't even have to touch the reader and it just opens the door, that's a proximity reader. And although it's very useful for physical security, it's not what we would use for controlling access to a screened subnet. Not what we would choose either. So in this case, we have a clear delineation between a screened subnet and the rest of the network. And the way we would commonly associate or control that is with a firewall. These days, probably on most networks, it's the next generation firewall, or I guess it would be the next generation firewall. It's hard to know at this point to know exactly what that might be, but that is indeed the correct answer. If you answered C, firewall, you've got 76% of you. You got that one absolutely correct. Hopefully that can help you with some of the things that you're working through in your list. This is perhaps one of the challenges with getting through these questions, is understanding what these different topics are. If you don't recognize some of these terms or you're not familiar with them, make sure you go through them. They are all listed in your CompTIA exam objectives, so make sure you're familiar with all of those that we go through. Now, one of the things that I don't have, I know we're at the top of the hour. We're actually past the top of the hour, sort of in overtime, but I have one more question for you that I want to go through to see how you do with this one. As always, of course, please, no answers in the chat room, no hints in the chat room. This question's a little bit different because this question is from my exam, my practice exams book. My practice exams book, for those of you that have not seen this before, is a set of exams I wrote because I was really tired of seeing bad questions on the internet, which is super easy to do, by the way. If you've ever been on the internet, there's plenty of bad questions. So I thought what we need to do is create a series of practice exams that are written by an IT security professional, someone who's been in the trenches, someone who has seen some of the largest networks in the world and what they're doing to secure those extremely large networks. And so I sat down and began writing. And we wrote up, I wrote up 380 pages. We've got 3 separate questions, exams with questions in here, 90 questions on each one of these. All of these have extensive information about what the right answers might be, what the wrong answers are. We have both multiple choice and performance-based questions in these books. They are available not only in a digital version, but in the physical version. This is the physical version of my practice exams book. If you get the physical edition, you get the digital edition for free. And I just so happen to have the digital edition right here on the screen. Let's go through a question from my book. That question asks, this is question B77, and it asks, a system administrator has protected a set of system backups with an encryption key. The system administrator used the same key when restoring files from this backup. Which of the following would best describe this encryption type? Is that asymmetric, key escrow, symmetric, or out-of-band key exchange? Now, I'm in my PDF reader because this is provided as a PDF, and I have in my PDF reader a set of annotation functions. You probably have this in your PDF reader. So if you wanted to mark different options on the screen, you can mark those different options, or you can remove them. You can write on the screen. If you have a stylus, you can write on your tablet because it's a PDF and it's completely open and available for you to make changes on that PDF, which I think is also very important. Because it is a PDF, there are also links embedded into the text itself. So of course, I mentioned here, we're on page 160 something on this book, or 150 really. 150, if we go to the bottom, 100 and what page is 157. So to get this answer, you can get the quick answer by going to page 163, or you get a lot of details by going to page 243. Well, the worst thing you could do in these PDFs is you have to scroll to get to the PDF. So what I've done is create a link where it says the details 243. I click that and it goes to page 243. I know it's not rocket science, but it's very nice to have that in the book itself. And so when you get to that page, it describes, here's the question again with all of the answers. And I tell you that the answer is C, symmetric. And of course, with many practice exams, it tells you that symmetric encryption uses the same key for both encryption and decryption, which is great if you knew that that was the right answer to begin with. My problem is that I always answer these wrong. But a lot of these practice exams don't really explain to you why the wrong answer was wrong. So in my practice exams book, on every single question, I list out all of the incorrect answers and I tell you why that answer was incorrect. So that if you answered key escrow and you're wondering, why did I get that wrong? It tells you key escrow is when a third party holds the decryption keys for your data. So you understand, oh, that's right. That's an escrow, sort of like an escrow on a mortgage. They hold the money for you. Or the escrow on a key is they hold the key for you. And now you understand more about that particular topic without having to go back to another book, without having to go back to the videos, without having to go over that again. It could just give you a reminder why that is the wrong answer. And at the bottom of this list, if you really didn't understand anything about the question, you can click on either the link that's in the book or use your phone to take a picture, or not take a picture, but put your camera in front of it so that you can use this QR code. And the QR code goes to this link for my video in Objective 2.8 symmetric and asymmetric cryptography, so you know where that is. And once you're finished with that question, there's a back button in your PDF reader. You go back to where you started and you can go to the next question on your list. That is my set of practice exams. If you think that might be something that you can use, you can find them on my website. Go to professormesser.com/securitype, and you will find that on my website, something you can either purchase as a digital edition or the physical edition, and I'll be glad to ship that to you. If you do purchase the physical edition, again, you get the digital edition for free. So that's where you want to focus on. Those are where you would focus on all of those. So make sure you're familiar with those. That is something that might help you with your studies. Please, it also helps support what we do here at ProfessorMesser.com. So another thing you can do. A lot of people want to find those objectives. Those objectives are incredibly important. If you don't have your set of objectives yet, make sure you download these. These are free. Go to ProfessorMesser.com/objectives and you'll see a link that takes you over to the CompTIA website, or just go to your favorite search engine, type in CompTIA Exam Objectives. It'll be the first link that shows up. Again, they are free for you to download and use. They should be the first thing that you go to whenever you're studying. They also make a very good last sanity check of what you're supposed to know for the exam. These are the exam objectives. You can see as I go through page by page, they are extensive in the information that's in here. Everything that's in my videos was created based on what's on these exam objectives, and what you're going to find on the exam is they stay incredibly close to these objectives. They rarely go outside the scope of these objectives, which means if you know everything in this objective list, you're going to pass your exam, because this is what they ask. Not a lot of other exam providers give you this level of detail. I highly recommend you take advantage of this. Once you go over to Microsoft or Cisco or some of these others, you're not going to get these great exam objectives. So this is a fantastic resource, and it's free. Make sure you take advantage of that. A great tool to have in your tool bag. I do one of these study groups every month. So in May, kind of pushing it a little bit. In fact, these are different than the dates I gave you earlier in the month, and you'll find those available there on my calendar. ProfessorMesser.com/calendar is when I always update that list. Make sure you have a look at those. The next study group on May 24th. That's when we're doing the next Security Plus study group. Make sure you either sign up on our website to get email updates, or you can also in the calendar know exactly when the next event is going to be. I do update those and be able to break through all of that. So another nice thing you might have is that study group date. Make sure you're familiar with it, and we love to have you here. We love doing this Q&A, and it'll be a great place for you to stop in and do more of this. Well, we've gone through an hour of Q&A. Now's the time where we do another hour of Q&A, but instead of me asking the questions, it's you asking the questions. Stick around right after this for our after show, and I'll be able to take questions from the chat room. There were a number of great questions that went by. There's one that just went by about key sizes and block sizes and other nonsense. So I'll be able to break some of this down for you and explain why it's important or not important. Feel free to ask those in the after show. Don't forget about our pop quiz questions on Twitter and Instagram. And of course, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel at ProfessorMesser.com/YouTube, or you can go to ProfessorMesser.com/Discord to join our Discord. If you're watching this video for continuing education unit credit, I would love to give you credit for this. What you want to do is go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click the Contact Us link. In the Contact Us link, put your name, put your email address, put in a subject line, put April 2023 Security Plus, so I know where this came from. And in the body of the message, on a line by itself, let's put a reference to that previous answer. What we want to put in, of course, is Purple Team. Purple Team is the super secret code word of the month. Stick that in there, and it takes me about a week to run through these, and I'll be able to send you back the information you were looking for the Purple Team. See, it just embed it into your brain, so you'll never be able to forget about it. That's what we're hoping for. That's really the best thing, isn't it? Stick around for the after show. Thank you for being here during this first hour. We got a lot more coming. Stick around for that. We thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time on the Security Plus Study Group. Okay. Take a sip. Let's bring the camera back up. Let's get this back over here. Very good. And now it is the after show. Now this is the part of the study group where instead of me asking the questions the entire time, you're going to ask questions and I'm going to answer them. Well, generally, I'm going to answer them. We'll see if that's really the case and being able to figure out the details. I think I've got a lot of things to work through. There were quite a bit on this selection. So I'm going to go to the chat. You can see the chat's right in front of me. So I'm going to watch the chat going by. We have a number of questions that have come through. I'm going to try to get back to some of the questions or some of the super chats we saw earlier. A number of you were asking about some of those, and then we'll go to some of the questions that you put into the list. Some of the older super chats went by. I think I got your names in, but if you had a question in there, mentioned that, I did a super chat. Here was my question. I'll be glad to go back to those. There are a few other folks that had some super chats in there. Lucian, for example, said, passed my Security Plus last week. Your video course notes, and tests were the perfect material and more than sufficient. All the best. Congratulations, Lucian, on your Security Plus, and thank you for the 5-year super chat as well. We sure appreciate the support of everybody and things you're putting through here. So thanks so much for that. Lady Vita, I want to thank you also for the super chat. No comments there, but a $10 super chat and worth mentioning. I sure appreciate the support as well. Best of luck with the studies you have, whether it's Security Plus or otherwise. Of course, super chats aren't necessary. I'm simply watching the chats go by so we can do a lot of these. Chase says, hey, can we add Linux Plus channel to the Discord? That might be a good one to have on the Discord. I'm always changing and updating certain things, but of course, one of the things on the Discord that I have is at the very bottom. If you want to open up your own study group, you can do that at any time simply by clicking at the bottom of the list of channels, and it will create a study group just for you in a room that you can manage, which means you have control. You can allow people in, you can kick people out, you can silence people, because it's your channel. And then once everybody leaves that channel, in about a minute, the channel disappears automatically. So although Linux Plus isn't there now, you may be able to find some ways that you can add it into the future. So, and maybe I will add some others into the Discord. Some of you, if you've got ideas about that, talk to me in the Discord about that, and we can kind of step through what types of channels you would like to have. Question from on the chat room says, does the after show get recorded? It does. I do have an after show that does get recorded here, this entire thing. So if you're watching the replay on YouTube, it's simply the study group and the after show in the same replay. If you're listening in on the audio format, that podcast listening format, then the podcast has two different podcasts. It has the actual show, and then the after show comes on right after that. Certainly good place to go. So there are a lot of questions that are coming through, some that are asking about pets. Not going to answer that one. Some asking about football. I don't know what you're talking about. So that was easy. Those were two just in and out for the, I don't want to offend the cat people, and I don't want to offend the dog people. So I like cats and dogs. I like all of them. Not gonna pick a side on that one. You're not going to pull me into that crazy controversy. That's not something I want to work through. There was a question early on about the CEUs that I send out. I will send you an email if you want to send me that information I mentioned earlier about earning the Continuing Education Unit Credit, or CEU. And I put a digital signature in an attachment when I send that back to you. This way you could take that digital signature and verify that everything in that message is exactly the way it was sent when I sent it. Nobody changed it in there. And of course, I mentioned in there that you earned 1 hour of a webinar category CEU. If you change that 1 to a 10, or you change the 1 to a 2 or a 3 or anything else, and you try to validate with that digital signature, the message will not validate. That's why there's a digital signature there. Is it something that probably will ever be used by CompTIA? Probably not. They accept CEUs on trust alone. CEUs are not something they commonly audit, but if they do show up to audit your CEUs, you can show them the email and say, nope, Professor Messer sent me an email. I was here. I knew the code word, and nobody changed this document because there's a digital signature here, and you can verify that. The question that we got earlier is, how do you verify the digital signature? I'm using PGP on my side to create the digital signature, so you should use PGP on your side to verify the digital signature. And as long as you're using PGP to do that, you should have no problem with the verification. If you have questions about that, pop into the Discord and we can step through some of those other options to be more familiar with what might be there. Other questions, let's see. The questions we had earlier, this was one, the book you showed us recently that showed those topics. Where can one get it? Now, I think you may be referring to the practice exams. That may be where we saw that come through, or maybe the course notes. Everything is on my website, though. I'm going to pop open a new browser window here real quick and bring up my website just so you can see this. Here we go. And there's the website. So here's the Professor Messer website. On this website, either under A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, there's all these different options. If you need course notes, practice exams, they're all listed right there on the screen. So for instance, the course notes and practice exams will take you to the same place. Oh, thank you, Google Ads, for bothering us in the middle of the live stream. So we can go to that page and you can see about the practice exams, all of the different, there's the course notes, there's the practice exams, everything's there on that page to give you an idea of what those are, what's available with those. So if you're looking for anything we've talked about in the study group so far, that's where you want to go. It will be all there. A number of questions came through earlier about different places in the world and where you can get vouchers on my site. As I mentioned, the vouchers available on my site are only available if you live and are taking the exam in U.S., Canada, or a number of U.S. territories. So I don't currently offer other vouchers for other countries. They are, for lack of a better word, country locked by CompTIA, but there are some things I'm working on to hopefully make some changes with that. Part of the challenge, of course, is dealing with international currencies and being able to do that. So we're trying to work through the scenario there of that, the tax implications and the logistics and all of the things that would come with that. It's not insurmountable, but it is complex, and I want to be sure it's done right from the very beginning, especially if you're getting somewhere else in the world. You're wanting to get your hands on these vouchers. It can be very useful. Currently, you would need to find a partner in your country to be able to provide any type of discount or benefit from those. There's a list of partners on the CompTIA website that might help you as well. Other questions, and this is a pretty good one, and we can kind of talk through whether my answer is good or not. This is from Robert, who asks, is there any plan to create / publish / offer for purchase flashcards for the bazillions of acronyms that come up in the Security Plus exam? That is indeed a popular question. I get that one quite a bit. I intentionally do not create flashcards, primarily because the questions you get on the exam are almost never associated with converting an acronym to a series of names or words or back again. The acronyms are often used the way we use them in the industry. Is that, oh, could you check PGP to see if it's using AES? Hey, did we configure the access point for WPA3? We almost never talk and spell out what those words are. In many ways, we just naturally associate the abbreviation or acronym with the thing that we are doing. We sometimes even forget what the words stand for because we never use them. We have to go back, wait, what was WP again? Oh, that's right, Wi-Fi protected access. We have to really think about it when we're trying to put those in. And on the exam, you will never get a question that says, what does WPA stand for? You'll never get a question like that. Those trivial type questions that are based on these. And really, that's the only thing that, well, that's the primary thing that I really believe flashcards would give you when you're dealing with acronyms and the description of those acronyms. Now, what would be useful might be the acronym and a definition of the acronym, what it is, how you would use it. But I did one of those, and it's called a video course. So I think if you go through a good book, you go through a good video course, or both of those, I think at the end of that course, you will have already gone through all of the important acronyms. It's not necessary to do flashcards at that point. And in fact, what I find with the acronyms that are at the end of the exam objectives, let's bring them up since we're talking about them this way. This is the 601 exam objectives. There they are. I'm just going to keep scrolling all the way down to the end. Scroll past 4, scroll past domain 5, scroll to the end, scroll. Finally, you get to the Security Plus acronym list, and they start going through these acronyms. So here's a good example. They have a number of different acronyms in here, like triple DES, 3DES. Do they have DES in here? That would be a good example of one if they did. They do. There's DES right here. DES, the data encryption standard. That's not in the exam objectives anywhere, nor do you really run into it anymore. It is completely hackable with an iPhone. You would never use DES on a network. We don't even have a list. And this sort of fits into another question I saw earlier. There's not even a list in the exam objectives of different hashing types or encryption types. It's out of scope for this version of the exam. But you will find there are other practice exams that you find on the internet and other places where they really drill you on this number, the size of the keys, the size of the blocks. Security professionals don't even know that information because we don't care. We find the one that fits for what we're doing, find one that's relatively safe and secure. And for those, we probably might investigate what the key size is, but it's often in the name of the encryption technology itself. And we use that particular key. So we don't ever block sizes. We never deal with block sizes in this. Now, if you're a developer and you're creating applications, that's different. But we're not developers and we're not creating applications. So that's not something we would run into. So I often tell people that are asking for, they want a list of encryption technologies. They want a list of hashing technologies. They want to know what key sizes are used by these technologies. They want to know what block sizes are used by the technologies. And although technically, perhaps there's some interest there, perhaps there's some useful knowledge hidden in there somewhere, it's not important at all for the Security Plus exam because it's not listed in the exam objectives. If it's not in the objectives, you don't need to be studying it. You're better off spending your time studying something that will absolutely have a chance of showing up on your exam rather than studying things that are outside the scope of the exam objectives that will never show up on your exam. So that's why I always strongly recommend to anybody studying to stick to the objectives. Now, when you get into IT security and you're doing a lot with encryption, perhaps those specific specifications, I guess that's why they're specifications, because they are specific. There's a good reason to know a little bit more about those, but you're going to learn that as you go. There's a whole world of things you're not going to study for your Security Plus exam that you will need to know in the world of IT security. But our goal here is to get you through the Security Plus exam. So I'm only going to recommend you study from things that are in the exam objectives. That is the key here. So I do not provide a list of these acronyms and what they stand for because you're never going to get a question like that on your exam. And I don't provide a list of all of these different encryption types and hashing algorithms and all of these other things. I don't list the size of the key. I don't list the size of the block because it's not important at all for the Security Plus exam. Not even important, not even where you need to go. So that's my recommendation to you. Stick to the objectives, study what's on the objectives. You're going to do fine on the exam if you do that. So very much my recommendation for you. I really don't understand a lot about going outside the scope of the objectives. I see this all the time. It's really a much better use of your time if you stick to the objectives. Make sure you're familiar. Others. Let's go through other questions that have come in. I've got a lot of questions. We're not going to go through OSI model in this particular study group. We have a lot of OSI. We just did last week. On Thursday of last week, we had our Network Plus study group. We did a lot of OSI in that study group for some reason. So if you're looking for OSI, that's a great place to go. As people have mentioned, the Orange team, that's, of course, IT professionals that are based in Florida or California. They're on the Orange team. That's a little known fact. Other folks, questions in the chat room. This is one kind of a question about the structure of the exam itself. This is from Michelle, who asks, just curious if the exam is done in a way where you must answer to proceed and cannot go back and change a previous question on the exam. And I suspect Michelle has taken a Cisco exam before, or there are also others in the industry that do this, that are adaptive type exams. An adaptive exam is one that you answer the question. When you hit next, you can't go back. You can't go back to what the previous question was. And in fact, the next question is going to be one dynamically created almost always. This is one dynamically created based on what you have previously answered, usually answered wrong. You answer wrong questions, you'll get more questions about that type. If you answer questions right, you don't tend to get more questions about that topic. They just assume you know that. That's a little bit more complex in its structure than the CompTIA exams, because CompTIA allows you to jump to any question at any time in the exam. When you start the exam, you get a maximum of 90 questions. Those 90 questions are determined when you hit start. All 90 of them are ready to go. You could jump all the way to the end and work backwards if you wanted to. You could jump to the middle of the exam and work out from there. It's completely up to you. This is also a great strategy in your exam, because if you're on a question and it's really difficult and you're not getting it and the clock is ticking and you're wondering, let's just keep moving, you can mark the question by clicking a box on your screen and go next. And then once you finish all of them up, you'll have a page that shows you everything you marked, and you can go back to that question and really spend a little more time on it. Maybe at that point, a question you ran into later helped you understand the question that was asked previously. So the exam itself might be able to give you points on the exam if you're able to use that strategy. So that's a great thing for the CompTIA exams, is that you don't have to worry that you can't go back. You can always go back, always see what those previous questions were, jump wherever you'd like in the exam. Very good question, something that's important if you're planning to take your exam, working through them. If you've ever taken a Cisco exam, it is a challenging exam, because when you hit that next, you're going forward. You can't go back again. If you hit next, you realize, oh no, that's too late. Too late to go back and change your mind at that point. It's already locked in, and you'll never be able to go back on that one again. So an important consideration for both of those exam types. Make sure you're ready when you walk in the door, regardless of what type you're taking. This is more of a functional question, a structural question with this. We'll do this one. Why is MD5 widely used, even though it's considered insecure or unsecure? MD5 is a hash algorithm. It is one that we have found that we can create collisions relatively easy in the world of cryptography. That's still difficult, but it's still something that if you're doing something with the MD5 algorithm, you are able to manipulate that a bit and come up with some collisions. That means that that theoretically you could create a website certificate that would properly authenticate to a third-party certificate that you were spoofing. So you could call yourself Google.com and create a certificate that was digitally signed using the MD5 algorithm that was also Google.com, but it wasn't really. It was one you created yourself. Now that's a theoretical exploitation of that particular problem with MD5, but MD5 is very well known. It's been around forever, very long time, and collisions, although they are something you don't want with a hash, the fewer collisions, the better. It still works very well for integrity. So for example, let's say it's something not as important as a website certificate. Maybe you're just downloading a Linux distribution and you're taking the hash they created MD5 for that Linux distribution, you're downloading it, you run the same MD5 algorithm hash on that distribution, you get exactly the same hash on both sides. That works just great. It's quick, it's easy, and it's something that works regardless of the collisions that you might run into, because it would be remarkably unusual for someone to make a change to a Linux distribution and somehow have those hashes match on the other side. That's how, even though MD5 has that vulnerability, it's a very unusual vulnerability to run into. And because of its speed and because of its longevity in the industry, people do tend to use it still. You will find, though, I think Linux distributions are a good example. Very often they've moved everything to a SHA-256 or higher so that people don't have to worry about MD5. Pretty much everything I've seen these days includes both. So you can make a decision on whether you'd like to do that or not. Just because we found one type of vulnerability that is affecting that particular algorithm in a particular example doesn't mean we have to throw it out completely. But certainly for high security environments, probably not the first choice we would use. We would probably use something where we haven't found that level of collisions in that particular algorithm that we're planning to use for hashing. So that should give you some context of when we would use these in the industry and how we use them. When they finally roll out of use is because There's just been so many vulnerabilities that we found in that algorithm. Maybe the vulnerabilities we found were extreme and really didn't allow us to continue to use that technology. Maybe the algorithm itself has gotten so easy to brute force with today's technology that we end up not using it. I mentioned DES earlier as an encryption algorithm. Well, DES is easy enough that you really could do a brute force on DES on your iPhone and have the answer in a matter of minutes. So that's not something you would really want to do either, is use DES. Triple DES, maybe so. But as time goes on, the ability to brute force becomes easier because our CPUs get faster. We find better ways to perform these brute force attacks across multiple systems simultaneously. We find better ways to create rainbow tables, and it becomes so much easier to break into these very easy types of passwords, for example. So that's why, as time goes on, we get rid of some of those older algorithms just because it becomes so easy to brute force them. Brute force, of course, you can't really protect against very well. If everything is right in front of you, it's really about time and CPU. So, and that's effectively the same thing when it comes to brute force. And as time goes, as our ability gets better and faster, we're able to crack those even faster than that. So we need to have even bigger key types, bigger types of security, different types of algorithms that are better protected. So that's important too. Let's keep going with these questions that are coming in. Quite a few to break through and see what the options there. Other ones on the list. We're going to keep going. What do you mean? No, never DES and never Telnet. Why would you not Telnet? It's such a great tool. You would not Telnet to communicate with something and send anything important. Although Telnet does become a very useful security tool just for sending data to a port number. If you don't have a netcat or any type of network-based concatenation tool that you can send information to another device, Telnet makes a really dumb but useful netcat tool, if you will. So very often we will use Telnet to see if a port number is open because we can send it information and see if it talks back to us. You know, we're not sending anything critical. We're not sending passwords. We're not sending private information. We're using it more as a security tool to pull or ping that particular open port on that device. So that's where Telnet really does come in handy. So I wouldn't say never use Telnet, but certainly never use Telnet for any type of remote communication. That's not what you would use Telnet for. You're using SSH anyway, so it's not even an issue. That's the goal. Let's keep going. Other questions okay, that's fine. Sometimes Telnet. I'm fine with that. That's where we go. This is more of a broader question about industry education. It's from William, who asks, what's your opinion of Western Governors University, Bachelors of Science in Cybersecurity and Information Assurance? Western Governors, for those not in the U.S. or that haven't heard of Western Governors before, is a consortium of universities that provide online IT training almost exclusively built around certification. So if you go into any of their programs, you come out of the program not only with the knowledge, but all of the certifications associated with that knowledge. So they do tons of certifications from Microsoft and CompTIA and Cisco and other organizations too. And I looked over their courseware. They got good stuff. And a lot of people have a lot of good things to say about Western Governors. It is more of an online type environment. It really requires you to be self-directed. I don't know if that's best for me, but that's what WGU really hopes for. And it's good enough that I think it would be extremely useful for someone going into IT who doesn't want to go to a traditional university, which probably isn't teaching IT anyway because they don't. But you want something that really is focused on skills that you can use on day one. And that's the one thing that college can't give you is skills. They don't teach skills. They teach broad perspectives of things you need to know about technology. But they don't tell you how to manage a Windows server, how to set up a VPN, how to protect a network, how to prevent a loop on a switch network. Those are things that are incredibly important. And so there are a number of organizations out there that can hope to teach you those things. Some are private, some are public or quasi-public. And WGU is a pretty popular version of that. I have, in fact, I know a few people that work at WGU that I have worked with in the past at other organizations. I haven't talked to them about what they do there, but there is a bit of trust I have in WGU because I know the person that works there. I've worked with them in the past. Are they free? They are not. They cost money, but it's not as much money as a traditional four-year university. And as I mentioned at the end of it, you got some good certifications to go along with the skills that you've learned, which is important too. There are a number of schools out there that do this. There are a lot of community colleges and an increasing number of universities that have started to get on the IT bandwagon. It is a very, very, very slow go. They don't make their changes very quickly. They're spending a lot of time on other things, apparently. They're not spending time on skills that technologists can use to get a job or get a better job. Although I got to tell you, at this point, I'm not really sad about that. We will take care of things on this side. The folks that have done this in the past, the folks that have been technologists, who have been in the field, who've been working on these things like myself, are more than happy to tell you what to expect and to help you learn the things that are going to be important that you can use throughout your entire career. That's what we're doing, working through them. Let's go through some other questions in the chat room. As I mentioned earlier, if you have a question, just go to the chat that's on your screen. If you're on my website at professormesser.com/live, it's the chat that's embedded on the page. If you're watching on YouTube, it's the chat that's on the YouTube. It's effectively the YouTube chat. So I'm watching all of those come through and work down and get more familiar with what those happen to be. Other question. This is a pretty good one. And I think it sort of speaks to a number of challenges we have in our industry with sort of keeping these things in the right context. This is from VoltGamer1, who says, I have a website developer background of HTML, ASP, .NET, web design, building home computers, networks, etc. However, I have no certs. If I pass the Security Plus exam, can I start higher than entry level? And that is really what people want to be able to do. They want to get a certification and then use that to get a job or get a better job. And of course, it's not just certifications that does that. It's a combination of different things. And I do have a video. It's in the YouTube video description of this video of how to get a job in IT with no experience. And I talk about a formal education. I talk about certifications. I talk about some practical knowledge. And I talk about knowing other people in the industry and how you can do that. And I step through each one of those in detail. It's a 30-minute video, which I know in my world of videos is very long, but it's just full of information. And it's one that might help you, give you some guidance on this. One of the challenges we have, though, with this particular example, and VoltGamer, I'm going to use you as a good example of this, is that the world of technology blends together at times. For the most part, and you've heard me describe this before, IT is kind of split into two different spheres, if you will. There is the IT side, information technology side, where you're managing servers, you're making sure that services are available for other people in the organization, you're protecting the data, you're configuring the network links, you're building out the infrastructure, you're designing the cloud-based infrastructure, you're creating ways to expand and decrease the sizes and locations of these cloud-based infrastructures. That's effectively the IT team, information technology. But then another part of technology that we have is more of the computer science side. It is application developers, people building mobile apps, people building apps for the web, people that are creating code. Maybe they're building hardware and creating firmware to go onto that hardware. They are the programmers. So if somebody's doing application development or they're doing programming, they're over on the computer science side. Those two spheres rarely connect together, if at all. There might be a little overlap right in the middle. If you were doing a Venn diagram of those two, there's a little slice in the middle where both of those might come together. But other than that, they are two completely different worlds. And that's why if you go look at jobs that are for application developers and programmers, there's a completely different set of requirements than somebody who's responsible for managing Active Directory, a network of Cisco devices, or security type infrastructure. They really do not touch each other. And so I tell people from the very beginning, pick a side, because these really don't slide together very well. The industry's tried to push these two circles together more and more. And what they found is they just don't move very much. That there's an entire world of knowledge that is you have to accumulate throughout your career for application development to be any good at it. There's a whole world of knowledge on the IT side that you have to accumulate throughout your career to be any good at the IT side. How are you supposed to have one person accumulate both of this? Well, the answer is you can't, because that doesn't work for humans today anyway. Perhaps we will evolve so our brain is larger so that we can collect more information. But in the meantime, those are two different careers with a very detailed amount of minutia that you have to be able to decipher that is very specific to either application development or information technology. And so when I tell people at the very beginning, pick a side, I'm really saying find out which side you like better. Do you like doing application development? Do you like creating applications? Do you want to build mobile apps? That's the side for you. I can't provide you with much information because that's on the computer science side. There's lots of other places you can go on the internet for computer science content. But if you're someone focused on IT and managing the server infrastructure and learning Linux and understanding data centers and understanding the cloud and databases and email and networking and security and all of those, keeping all of those running and keeping all of those safe, then you want to be on the IT side. So once you've made that decision, you can better focus your efforts. There have been a number of people that have come through my website that want to do both. And I get it, because both are really interesting. There's something really interesting about solving problems on the development side. But there's also a lot of really interesting things about solving problems on the IT side. Both are problem-solving type job roles. And I love that part of IT. But as I mentioned, you can't know everything there is to know about programming and know everything there is to know about IT to be able to do your jobs. That's way too much information. You're either going to be a very bad programmer or a very bad IT person. If you try to combine both of those, you can't be both. So I tell people, if you want to get into IT, focus on IT and go look at the job descriptions in your area. What are they asking for? Are they asking for Security Plus? Are they asking for Network Plus? Are they asking for A Plus? Do they want certifications at all? It really depends on where you are in the country as well. For example, if you get into the U.S. federal government and jobs that are being offered there, a lot of them tend to lean towards Security Plus. If you look at jobs that may be available in Dallas, Texas, or in Seattle, they may be asking for more A Plus or Microsoft or Cisco or Linux or something else. So go see what the employers want. That might give you an idea of things that interest you as well. Maybe you had not even thought about Linux, but you notice in your area, a lot of the jobs, they want Linux knowledgeable people. I like Linux. Maybe I should go get my Linux Plus. That's a perfectly reasonable and, in fact, educated direction to be going. You've got it now. You've got the information. You can build a strategy, and you can work towards that end goal. And knowing Linux is good, really, no matter where you are. That's some good knowledge right there. Maybe there's people more interested in automation, and they say we want somebody more familiar with PowerShell or somebody more familiar with Python. And although you might think, well, isn't that programming? It is not. Programming, I clearly put into the category of application development. That is scripting. Now, I understand there is a pedantic side of me that wants to call that programming, because at the end of the day, if you're writing a script, you're writing a program. I get it. But for the purposes of separating those two different spheres, let's leave the C++ and the programming side over there on the computer science side, and let's put batch files, batch scripts that we would build, some Python, PowerShell, even JavaScript, we can put over on the scripting side for automation. Not the same thing as a programmer, not even close. So let's try not to conflate those two things. The goal, though, is to give you an idea of where you should be going with this. And when you run into the scenario that VoltGamer has, where you've done a lot of different things, how do you focus in on maybe one set of core skills? And I think the better you can really become an expert in a niche, the better you're going to, or the more success you will find in this particular industry. You'll certainly have more options available the more you know about individual subjects. So if you are interested in Linux, don't just become familiar with Linux, become an expert at Linux. If you're interested in Active Directory, don't just become familiar with Active Directory, become an expert with Active Directory. I've met lots of consultants through the years in my travels, some consultants that do nothing all day but Active Directory. That's all they do. Remarkable, isn't it? And trust me, Active Directory is broad enough and complex enough that you really do need very smart people who know everything there is to know about Active Directory, especially in some of these very complex environments. So that's what I would recommend. Go through and see if you can become more familiar with those technologies. In fact, not just more familiar, but expert in those technologies. Drill down into them, see what employers would like you to have, and then you can make some of those other things happen. You can make that direction change. You can move the boat a little bit and move in a different direction. I think that's also good too. Other questions. Let's go through the list of these. This is a pretty good one. So this is from Michael, and since he put a $10 super chat on it, this is a pretty good one to go through at the moment. Hey, Professor, about to get my master's in IT management in the fall. I have an A+ and Network+, but not sure where to go from here. You can't see this on the screen, but we can see in the chat. It says, I feel like tech opportunities are hard to find in South Florida. Having lived in South Florida for about 10 years and being very familiar with the tech market there, you're in a great place. There are a lot of tech jobs in South Florida. And the tech jobs that are there are many and varied. Just a huge set of technology there. You've got, for example, just in the South Florida area, you've got cruise lines. Let's just talk about cruise lines alone. So whether it's Carnival, whether you're looking maybe up in Broward at some of the folks, there's a couple of cruise lines right there off I-75, for example. They have massive data centers. They're very large data centers. Think of these cruise lines are just as much data as they are ships. So the way that they've got their registration systems, their marketing, their management of the ships themselves, their management of their employees on the ships, the ability to the data on the ship itself for the people who are cruising, all of that is in itself many and complex. So there's just one good opportunity with one individual series of companies there, 3 or 4 just in that area that have amazing technologies there. Let's go back to your question though, and talking about your master's in IT management. So you've got a couple of really good things here. You've got your formal education you're finishing up. You've got certifications that apply towards the technologies you're interested in. Now it's more about making some connections. And in South Florida, there's some great user groups. There's the Cisco user group. There's a Microsoft user group, some that are specific to the Miami area, some up in Palm Beach. There are companies that have their own user groups. So if you look at, for instance, Palo Alto Networks, we used to do tons of user groups in that area. I'm sure they still do. Those are places, great places to meet people in your local area who are doing this today. And in fact, you'll probably meet someone from one of these cruise lines. Maybe you'll meet somebody who is who's in a call center there. Maybe there's a call center management company that's in South Florida you're working with. Maybe it's a financial organization. There's lots of financial jobs in South Florida. That's another great place to go. There's manufacturing. There is federal. There is state and local government is huge in South Florida. All of these are great places to get into the industry. And as I tell people who've never gotten a job in IT, get your foot in the door. You want to get in to the circle, because once you get that first job in IT, you can now start using that for other things. If you want to move to a different organization, you want to go up to Boca where they have a financial company that you're working with. In Miami, maybe it's a company you're working with that handles gift cards. Maybe you want to move to one of the larger cruise lines. Maybe you want to work outside the country. So you want to work for a company that handles international type services. I worked with a data services company that was based in the UK, but had equipment and a setup in the Miami NAP. So the network access point, that is where the internet sort of comes together there in downtown Miami. So there's lots of options available. I got my first IT jobs in South Florida, working with insurance companies and call centers and value-added resellers, and eventually expanded that out to work for the manufacturers of the equipment that we were using that were based in California, but needed representatives in Florida. So there's no better person to ask than me about IT jobs in South Florida, because that's really where I got my jumping off point into IT, was in South Florida, specifically in South Miami, right off of US 1. So that's where I met Mrs. Professor Messer, was in Miami. So a lot of great things there for IT folks, a lot that you can do. And if you've got questions about that or wondering about it, or I've got that contact us link at the top of my website. We've got the Discord that you could always go to if it's a quick question. Those are great places to go if you have a quick question about a follow-up on any one of those. This is another good question. Let's step through another one. Before we do, want to mention the super chat we got. This super chat, I'm very grateful to your efforts and hard work, and I'm very grateful for your super chat as well. Thank you for the kind words. Perhaps that's worth more than money. It really is. And the super chat just makes it all the better. Thank you so much for the support of the website. And this kind of applies to all of you. We couldn't do these live streams without your support, not just financial support, but watching the videos, attending the live streams, talking in the chat. There's lots of great conversations going in the chat of this live stream, and a lot of great conversations we have on the Discord when we're not here. I think that's a great place for you to go. ProfessorMesser.com/Discord. That's where you should go to join us. That's a great place to send me messages as well. And a lot of the questions you're having here, I can answer, or other people that are already in Discord can give you their perspective of what worked for them. And then you can decide what makes sense for me, because everybody has a different path. Everybody sets up a different direction because everybody has a different set of goals. And IT is one of these very broad vertical type markets that you can choose where you want to go at any particular time. So you might have a real interest today in Linux, and Linux is where you spend all your time. You become an expert in Linux. You know the details of the operating system. You can manage it. You can troubleshoot that operating system. You can correct problems. You become the uber Linux administrator. But then as you get into it, you're starting to do more networking, and you're realizing, wow, there's a whole world underneath the surface with the packets and the frames, and I want to know more about this. And then you suddenly shift gears into networking, and you learn as much as you can about networking. So that's a very common thing in IT. You sort of move over into this field, and you start jumping into that part of IT. So now you're familiar with operating systems and networks. Now that you know both of those, now you have a lot of questions about how to secure that. What about these packets and the information inside of them? How do I secure that going into the operating system? And how can I firewall some of these things? Should we create a VPN to protect this data? Well, now you're moving into the security side. So some of these sort of lead you there and put you on a path. Some of these you choose the path yourself. But I think as anyone is getting into IT, they think that, and sometimes I find that people think they're sort of getting into a field, they're doing this thing with Linux, and that's all they're going to do the rest of their career. Oh no, this will change many, many, many times through your career. I've done everything from field service tech, help desk administration, or help desk person, Windows administrator, desktop administrator, server administrator, network admin, and then ultimately got into protocol analysis, network management, and ultimately cybersecurity. So I sort of bounced around from technology to technology because that's what the industry was doing. These new technologies were showing up. These new ways to connect people together with applications and networks was changing under our feet, and we needed experts that knew about these technologies to be able to support them. You may find this all happens organically for you. Just becomes a really exciting role to be in. That's why I'm so passionate about IT. I tell people all the time, this is a great place to be because you get to decide what you want to do. You get to decide where you want to work. You can figure out what makes sense for your style of living, what type of hours you want, where you want to live in the world. It's a great option. You have plenty of these that you could do. So focus on that. Focus on just getting your foot in the door. And I think that's going to be the important part for most of us. Other questions. I've got more that are coming through here. Oh, that was a good question that came up earlier. Thank you for mentioning it, because I think this is one that I also get a lot of very good questions on, and it slipped by me there. It went so fast, but there was a question that came up earlier from JR that said, any suggestions on how to land a job if you're older and you're changing careers? That's me. I'm older. I don't know if I'm changing careers yet, but some of us that have been in the industry a while, or some of us that are coming back to the industry, or you're kind of getting into the industry and you're, well, in our industry, if you're 30-year-old, right? So 30 years old and older, you're old people. So what I often tell people is that the computers don't care how old you are. As long as you know how to work with Active Directory, you know how to set up a switch, you know how to configure your firewall, the system doesn't really care. The people that do care, though, are the people that are hiring you and the ones you're working with. And although we as as sort of an industry, as IT and sort of everyone in the world, we always talk about that anyone should be able to come in and do this job. Inclusion is a big part of our culture today. And I agree with that. We should allow anyone who wants to work in IT to come in and work and be part of this amazing culture and technology that we've created. But the problem is that there are people that are not convinced that someone who is getting into the industry at 40 or 50 years old should be working on the help desk, or they don't feel that it's a good fit, or perhaps they have in their mind that they're out of scope for this particular job. They really should be doing something different in IT. This becomes a little bit of a challenge. There's a little hint of ageism in there, whether it's somebody who's too young or whether it's somebody who's too old. Both of those are bad situations. And we really want to find a way to focus in and avoid any issues along those lines. And I would highly recommend you look at my video on how to get a job in IT with no experience. There are 4 elements in that list. The last element is you know someone who works there. And for us old people, if I may speak for us 30-year-olds out there in the industry, one of the things that you will find is that when you know somebody who works there, a lot of these problems go away. Because ultimately, you want to hire people that you can trust, that you know are going to do the job. And if there's somebody working here already that can vouch for you, you really get moved up in the list. So this is the opportunity because you've been around the industry, you know people, you probably got a family, you've met people at school, you've met people at church, you've met people in other organizations you're a part of, that you can ask them, hey, you guys hiring? Because I'm looking around at another position. You got anybody doing networking or whatever it is you're doing? You're doing Linux, you're looking for an Active Directory expert, whatever it is you do, and see if you can get that person to submit your resume. See if you can get that person to write an email to the hiring manager within IT who's handling this. They don't even have to be in IT. They could be in another part of the company if you want, but they would be able to vouch for you so that they can kind of get rid of some of those gatekeeping type things, get rid of the ageism, or at least a portion of it, and have somebody listen to more of what you're saying rather than looking at who you are. This is also a good place where you should think we have to be smarter than the youngins. We have to bring to the table a lot of these stories that we have about working in the trenches. And if you haven't worked in IT in the trenches, you may not have stories yet. In that same video I mentioned, I talk about some projects you can do at home and how it can create some narratives that you can bring to an interview. If you've never heard my story about these interviews before, I tell people all the time that it's so important that you have stories to tell. When you walk into an interview, your job is not to answer the questions they ask of you, per se. Your job is to answer these questions with stories, with a beginning, a middle, and an end. You should never answer an interview question with yes. Are you familiar with Active Directory? Yes. That's it. There's no, you're not going anywhere from there. If somebody asked me, are you familiar with Active Directory? I got to have a story. Oh, let me tell you about Active Directory. I set up an Active Directory configuration in my home lab a few months ago. I was setting it up to do this particular project, and immediately after setting it up, I ran into this problem. And then you can describe the problem. Here's what I was doing. At a separate machine, I would try to connect to the Active Directory. It would not work. And what I found, I took a packet capture of what it was doing, and what I found is that it couldn't find the Active Directory server because I had neglected to set the DNS of my client to be the DNS that I'm running on my Active Directory server, so that DNS could tell the client where the Active Directory server was. Once I did that, suddenly I'm able to connect, I got full access, and I'm able to do all these crazy things. Let me tell you what I did in Active Directory to lock this machine down so my kids couldn't screw it up. I did this set up these Active Directory configurations. I set up a rule for this. We put it in this OU, and then we deployed it. And now every time they log into my home network, they're not able to change the background or erase data because I've set up these group policies only for their OU or their user in the Active Directory database. Isn't that crazy? There, it was just like a 10-minute story that we told about what we wanted to do, a problem we ran into, how we did troubleshooting on the problem, how we solved the problem, and what the final results were. That's what you want to go into an interview with. And it doesn't have to be about Active Directory. It could be about you setting up a firewall. Maybe you started to set up one of these open source firewalls. That's going to be a great series of conversations to have. I plugged this into my internet. You'll never believe what I saw coming in the internet side. You'll never believe what I saw going out the internet side. And here's the report. You can even show them the report from the firewall that says, here's the information on my network that I saw coming in. Look at all these bots that are out there. Look at all these worms that are still running. You'll find worms still running on the internet from 10 years ago and more. That you'll just see them pop up. And we just have firewalls now that just don't let them in, just dismisses them, but they're still out there. And you can even ask the person interviewing, guess how many times I had this particular worm hit my firewall. We can do closest to the pin. You know, if there's more than one people, guess 20, 30, 100, 1,000. Here's the report. You know, those are great stories. They're going to go out of that interview and say, that guy really knows his stuff. He really set up that home lab and look at the reports he left with us. You know, leave those color reports with them, have them look them over. You know, that's a great interview, but it has to be a story. So if any of you are, I get these all the time. I've gone to these interviews. Nobody's hiring me. I'm talking to the managers. Nobody's hiring me. And my question is, what stories are you telling? You go, what do you mean? Like the stories, like there's a wolf and the sheep? Well, no, there's a story about you doing something with IT. That's the story. And you have to have 3 or 4 of those ready to go whenever you walk into the room with these interviews. So this also applies to the folks that were sort of looking at how do I break down these walls of the ancient 30-year-olds in IT. That's how you break down a wall, is you just start talking to people about the things that you have done. Does it apply necessarily directly to the jobs they're hiring you for? It may or it may not. They may not care that you do Active Directory because they're not hiring for an Active Directory job. They may not care about your firewall because they're not hiring for a networking or security job. Maybe they're hiring for a help desk person. Doesn't matter. They want to know about what you can do when there's a problem, how you resolve these issues, and how you communicate with people. That's also an important part of the storytelling, because you want to be this, in a way, talking back and forth with someone, and they're going to know that you're not an employee now. They're going to know that you don't know what the specific job requirements are for this job. That's okay. They're really looking to see if you know how to approach an issue, how you troubleshoot that issue, and how you resolved it. And that's the important part, is working through those. If you're familiar with that, you can talk that story and familiar enough with that story. That's the real key. How do you share those stories in a portfolio? Which is actually a pretty darn good question. Is how do you do that? Do you make it to a blog or something? I think the way you do it today, in the past, putting it in a blog would be great. I think the way you do it today is LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the primary method for communicating your professional skills and comments regarding the industry in a professional public forum. And it's a great way to look for people to hire. And very often people who have posted the things that they have done on LinkedIn often results in them getting jobs because an employer saw what they were posting and said, that's the kind of people we're looking for right there. Or you can reference your LinkedIn. Once you've built this portfolio of stories on your LinkedIn, you can simply reference it in the interview. Oh, I just posted about this on LinkedIn. Let me tell you my story about Active Directory. Boom. And you just keep going down that road. You can use this not only for what you're doing now, but if you've built this story, you've worked very hard at putting together the firewall. You've worked very hard at learning these Active Directory skills. You've worked very hard at building this Linux machine. Why not tell the world what you found and the things you're doing with it? Does it matter that to other people, it might, to a seasoned Linux professional, your installation of Linux and you building a web server on it and you enabling a database server on it would be relatively boring for them to read? Well, that's okay. You're not writing it for them. You're writing it for a potential employer. You're writing it as a document of the things that you have done. And it's a great jumping off point for the story that you have and to bring that employer back to your LinkedIn page, because you'll certainly have other things there that you're just not going to have time to talk about in your interview. Well, now they can start going through all these projects you've done at home in the home lab. And now you've got a great place to go to explain to other people why you're right for this position. You kind of spend all of your time in the interview talking about their company, which, by the way, is just as important. You should also have a story about their company. I don't mean that you've done work for their company or that you did any type of IT type services for the company. Do not. One of the worst suggestions I ever got is before you go into the interview, you should do a vulnerability scan of their internet IP address. Worst idea ever. Do not. There should be something on the screen like, no, do not circle with the line. Don't do that. Do not perform an Nmap or vulnerability scan to a third party without permission. That's an awful idea. And even worse is walking in and telling them you did it. You're not getting that job. So don't do that. But you could talk about things you have done on networks where you did have control of that. Set up your own server, then run an Nmap scan. What does an Nmap scan of a freshly built Windows machine look like? I don't even know. I just said it. I don't know. I've never done that. I don't know what it looks like. What does it look like with firewall turned on? What does it look like with Windows firewall turned off? It probably looks different. What does it look like if I enable Apache web server on Windows and turn it on? What about MySQL? What about Microsoft SQL Server? Does it look different turned on than turned off? Does it look different with the Windows firewall turned on or turned off? What does an Nmap scan of those look like? What does a vulnerability scan of that device look like? So maybe you get a well-known free or freely available vulnerability scan and you run it on a brand new Linux machine or you run it on a brand new Windows 11 machine. What does it look like? I'll bet the people who are in your interview have never done it either. And here's some interesting things we can go through. That's what you want to bring to the table. That's a very simple thing to do, by the way. You can do that in an afternoon. Load up Windows 11, stock config, maybe not even with any type of patches, so that you can really get some interesting data. Then run some vulnerability scans. Then turn off the firewall, run the vulnerability scans before, just for those people who always tell you the first thing you should do is turn off that stupid Windows firewall. Well, what happens when you do that? Is that good or bad? Are they really giving you good advice, or are they opening you up for problems? How can you confirm that? You need to run your own tests, and that's how you would do that. So I've given you 4 or 5 different stories, 4 or 5 different labs you can do on your own time at any time. You can go do that. So that's, in fact, other people in the chat room have their even other ideas they've come up with. So, and I bet if you got into Discord and you start a conversation about what home lab things do you think I should do that would be interesting for a story for an interview, I'll bet you get a million ideas of what you can do with it. So that's where I would focus my efforts to. Find those jobs, add the story so that when you walk in, nobody else is going to have a story like that. That would be useful, especially if you're somebody working through the details of that. That's where I would focus if you're trying to get through some of those more difficult, challenging pieces. Because if you get to a point where it's an interview, whether it's a web-based interview on Zoom or some other service, or whether you're walking in a building and talking to somebody across the table, both of those are great opportunities. And I don't think, as someone who has been in the hiring manager for a lot of interviews, people show up unprepared. I was mentioning earlier, I want to kind of close the loop. I know we're talking a lot about interviews, but I want to close the loop on part of the story I was mentioning is you need to have a story about that company. And that's because there is, especially if it's a public company, it's a large organization, there's a lot of information that is in their annual report or quarterly reports that talks about projects that are going on. It talks about plans for the future. And you can ask some very knowledgeable questions about their company without knowing anything about their company. So if you go to an annual report or quarterly report for a large public company that you're interviewing with, and they talk in there about a project for data governance, or they talk about a project for long-term cloud-based data storage. These projects they talk about publicly are projects, and maybe it's even more general than that. The company is going to start moving into an area where they've never done anything before. Maybe they make sweaters and they're going to move into retail. They're going to take their sweaters and they're going to open up their own retail stores. That's pretty common. You see that all the time. So the question I have is, that's an interesting change. So you guys have experience setting up retail stores? What type of deployments are you looking for? Are these in sort of the big cities? How are you going to network all those things back? What are your plans for supporting them remotely? There's a lot of interesting challenges there. And this would be a good time for you to show them, the things they're working on. You've read through what's on their website. You've read through their annual reports. I had someone show up once in an interview with a 3-ring binder of pages on their website. We didn't have mobile connectivity quite the way we have it today, and they weren't sure they were going to have wireless in the interview room itself. And so they brought just a few printed pages that they put into a binder so they could open up the binder and refer back to things on the website. And you can do the same thing on a tablet. You can do the same thing with a PDF you've created so that you can sort of talk over in this piece of paper. I noticed you guys were doing this. How is that going to affect what you're doing with IT in general? You can talk very broadly about those types of questions. That's what I would kind of focus on too. So I think there's some great stuff in the world of technology that is publicly available, but allows you to start a conversation, especially because you're going to talk for 20 minutes, for 30 minutes, and they're going to ask that question. So we've asked a lot of you today, do you have any questions for me? And you better have one. Better have some good ones. And that may be where you pivot over to the website. Hey, I noticed in your annual report that you're planning to roll out to the West Coast. Is that something that's going to happen quickly? Is that going to happen over time? How do you plan on connecting to all those sites? Will this be cloud-based infrastructure? Are you going to have equipment at the sites? There's a lot you can do. So I think if you got the opportunity in an interview and they ask that, they're going to ask the question, do you have any questions for me? The first question for them should be about them. You want them talking about them. Don't make it about you first thing. A lot of people think that's your opportunity to go, how much does this job pay? What are the benefits? Hey, do I get some time off? That's not where you go. They go, yes, it pays this much. It does have time off. Thanks so much for coming in. Good day. It should really be about how could I bring something to the table for you? And telling them, I know something about your company now. I've been doing some research. Here's some things I found. That's where you focus. There'll be plenty of time to talk about salary and benefits and negotiate all those things. This would not be the time to do it. And there are some, if you look on the internet, and they're right, folks in the chat room are doing sort of the common trite kind of questions. Well, how do you like working here? What's your example of a normal day here at the bar? Okay, but you don't really want to know that, do you? Do you? Because I don't think that nobody really wants to know that. You should have something you want to know. To ask about, how's that? You're going to need a lot of people for that? Is this, are you thinking about doing a big hiring group for this big project coming up? Are you consolidating it with something else? Is there a project that's finishing up and you're moving people over from that one? How do you plan on getting everybody on the same page? What do you use today? That's a massive project. What do you use to manage these projects for everybody that's there? And then kind of talk about the systems they go through during the day. In a way, you're sort of asking them about their day, but in a different way. And I think that sort of helps the person interviewing too. I will tell you, I've told you already that a lot of people that come into interview don't prepare and they don't do a great job at being an interviewee. I can also tell you the vast majority of people who interview, who are the interviewer, they're not very good either. I mean, these are people that they do something else in IT normally, and their boss showed up to them in the morning and said, here's a resume. He's going to be here at 1. Go talk to him for 30 minutes. That's all they give you. So you got a resume. And so first, they're not going to read the resume. They go, 1 o'clock. Okay. And then they forget. They go, the phone rings at 1. They're like, there's a guy here to see you. Oh, yeah, it's 1 o'clock. You sit in the room. They go, okay, so tell me about yourself. Like they don't even know where to go. So very few times do you actually get an exceptional interviewer, or even a good one for that matter. So you have to carry the interview. You have to tell them what to do with that. It's often that the role of a political person. If you talk to someone who is in a political position, they are elected and they are in a position. Often their watchword is their job is to never answer a question. They never respond directly to a question. Instead, they take the question and they pivot. What about the budgeting shortfall for the year? The shortfall I have a problem with is our kids reading. And that's why we need better schools. You just pivot. So you don't necessarily have to answer the question, tell me about yourself. You can easily take that. Oh, well, I'm finishing up my IT. I just finished up my IT management degree. I've been working on certifications, and I just finished working on the latest project in my home lab dealing with Active Directory. Would you like to hear about that? See how we just pivot? Like I have some stories. I wrote these stories down so that I could remember them. We're going to talk about my stories. And that's what you should do, is talk about your stories. You just pivot. Plus, they will thank you for this. The more you're talking, the happier they will be that they don't have to talk and go through the list of questions. If you were a color, what color would you want to be? Those are the questions they're going to ask you unless you have some stories. So if that doesn't scare you into getting some stories, I don't know what will. The answer, of course, is orange. I think we all knew that. I think that's a great place to finish up for today. I've gone a little bit of overtime in the after show, but I think that gets us to where we need to be. I want to thank you so much for being here in our first hour when we did the Q&A. We have so much fun with these. Thank you also for your time and your questions in the after show. There's always something that's unusual coming across my chat, and I'm more than happy to take the usual with the unusual. It makes my day. Thanks so much for your ongoing support. If you'd like to get in touch with us at any time throughout the month, we're over on the Discord. We're on the website. Go to professormesser.com/Discord. If you want to support what we're doing here, we have course notes. We have practice exams. We have downloadable videos. We have downloadable audio. It's all on our website at professormesser.com. There's lots there that you could go through and plenty of information that's going to help you learn what you need to know to pass your Security Plus exam. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time on the Security Plus Study Group.